And then are you planning to come to work for Oh, I think you So, have you gotten to speak with Barbara? She's the one in the blue dress, third row back. So, well, yes. Well, basically, it's her and Clark. So Barbara used to be in David's position as the chief assistant county attorney for years. And then Barbara went from there into private manager's practice with two very two very well-known attorneys. So she'd be a great resource.
Well, we'll do the best we can.
Yeah, it is what it is. If I gotta cancel, I gotta cancel.
And Clark's father was a well-known English attorney for years here. Yes. Yeah, those two pretty much. There's another one, Shelley Johnson. I'll tell you, it's funny because we're all, it's an incestual group. Yeah.
And it's always there. He actually is missing Pasco.
Oh.
There he is.
Can't complain.
I'm here.
You should
On the dot, man.
Should have sent Richard.
1:30.
What?
You should have sent Richard.
That's what we figured. Richard would be walking up.
Ready, Denise? I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. We would stand for a moment of silence in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Madam Clerk, can we have the roll call, please?
Mr. Jamie Girardi.
Here.
Mr. Derek Contlitz.
Here.
Mr. John Moody.
Here.
Mr. Christopher Poole.
Here.
Mr. Chris Williams.
Here.
Chairman Charles Gray.
Here. And the proof of publication, please.
The items are advertised in the Tampa Bay Times on February 21st, 2024, March 6th, 2024, and March 20th, 2024, for the affidavit of certified mailings and site postings.
Okay, thank you. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
Motion to approve the minutes from the February 8th meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the minutes? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay, motion carries. Take a minute today for anybody who plans to give testimony or come up and speak today. If you will stand and raise your right hand and be sworn, please.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, so help you God?
Absolutely.
Okay, and for those of you who haven't done this before, when you come up, We just ask you to give your name and your address so that we can get it for the record and speak right into the microphone there so we can get everything recorded. So we'd like to welcome everybody today. We're the Planning Commission. We're appointed by the Board of County Commissioners and we meet twice monthly. We serve as a local planning agency and we hold public hearings, transmit to the Board of County Commissioners our recommendations on comprehensive plan amendments, land development code amendments, rezonings, conditional use requests. Planning Commission is the final decision-making body for special exceptions, certain appeals, variance requests, and certain alternative standard requests. However, final decisions may be appealed to the Board of County Commissioners. We have a list of those meeting dates. If they're important to you, you'll want to attend those. If anyone is in opposition to any comprehensive plan amendment, land development code amendment, rezoning, conditional use, or any item where the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, it will be important for you to attend the appropriate Board of County Commission meeting. For those of you who are not familiar with the format of our meetings, we have 3 sections. We have continuances. Continuances, if we have any of those, would be items where either the staff or the applicant has asked for a continuance for any number of reasons to get more information or do some follow-up work. It's been our custom to grant continuance requests unless we have extenuating circumstances. And then the second area is consent. These are items that are on the consent agenda. We're going to go through those items one at a time as we read them off. If there's somebody in the audience that would like to have them discussed, please raise your hand. We'll pull it from consent and we'll put them on the regular items. The consent items, everything that stays on consent will be voted on at one time and approved. Those things that are staying on consent. Things that move to the regular items or the items that were regular to begin with will be all heard today, and the applicants will present their application, and then anybody in the audience will have an opportunity to come up and ask questions or state their concerns, and then the applicant will have an opportunity to come up and answer those questions, and we'll make our decisions from there. The applicants will have 3 minutes to make their presentations, and the audience will have 3 minutes to state their concerns. Following the presentation, then the applicant will have a 5-minute space of time to respond again, unless there are continuing questions that we have approved. There's been a request at least 24 hours prior to this meeting in writing for additional time. Someone may be granted extra time, but I don't believe we have any of those. Do we, Denise?
Mr. Chair, no, we do not have any requests for additional time.
Okay. So we do not have any of those, so this would be a good time for you to, if you have a phone, I'm sure most of you do, please put it in the silent position or turn it off so that it doesn't interfere with anybody's presentation. Everybody can hear. And before we start the regular meeting, we're opening the meeting for public comment. Is there anyone here to talk about anything today that's not on today's agenda? If there is, if you'll come up, state your name and address, and I assume that you have been sworn. You can confirm all that for me. I'd appreciate it.
Hi.
Hi.
It's way over there. My name's Lisa Moretti. I have been sworn. My address is 16331 Igola Woods Trail.
Thank you.
I'd like to enter these into the record and a copy for each of you.
All
Is that
right.
okay?
Do I have a
Motion
motion?
to file and receive.
Second?
Okay.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Since we're all out of order, right?
Yeah, all right.
You'll have 2 maps, 2 pages, sorry, that have maps showing Pasco County's projected conservation versus sprawl for the 2040 horizon and the 2070 horizon from the University of Florida. So I was reading something this morning. Are you okay for me to begin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you've already lost 3 minutes, so. I'm sorry, go right ahead, yeah.
I was reading something this morning and it struck me and I thought this would be a good reminder from the book that I was reading. It's not just sentimental attachment that has you upset. It's the expectation based upon decades of experience that what will be built here you will detest. It will be sprawl, cookie-cutter houses, wide, treeless, sidewalk-free roadways, mindlessly curving cul-de-sacs, a streetscape of garage doors, a beige vinyl parody of Leave It to Beaver, or worse yet, a pretentious slew of McMansions, complete with the obligatory gatehouse. You are against unbridled growth because you believe that it will make your life worse. You are correct in that belief, because for the past 70 years, we Americans have been building a national landscape that is largely devoid of places worth caring about. Soulless subdivisions, residential communities, utterly lacking in communal life. Strip malls, shopping centers, big box chain stores, and artificially festive malls set within barren seas of parking lots, antiseptic office parks, ghost towns after 6 p.m., and mile upon mile of clogged collector roads. The only fabric tying our disassociated lives back together, this is growth, and you find little reason to support it. In fact, so far as your daily hectic schedule allows, you fight it. Once a citizen, you have now become a NIMBY, not in my backyard, or what professional planners dismissively term a banana. Build nothing anywhere near anything. Still, it would be nice if there was a more constructive role to play, only if there was some third choice. Obviously, that third choice is good growth. But there is really such a thing? Does there exist a man-made place that is as valuable as the nature it has displaced? The problem is that one cannot easily build places like Charleston anymore because it's against the law. Similarly, Boston's Beacon Hill, Nantucket, Santa Fe, Carmel, all of these well-known, wonderful places exist in direct violation of current zoning ordinances. Somewhere along the way, through a series of small and well-intentioned steps, traditional towns became a crime in America. At the same time, one of the largest segments of our economy, the home building industry, developed a comprehensive system of land development practices based upon sprawl, practices that have become so ingrained as to be second nature. It's these practices and the laws that encourage them which must be overcome if good growth is to become a viable alternative. I hope you'll take that to heart, because we are at a tipping point in our county. And that's what these two maps show you, is what is projected for the 2040 horizon if we take a conservation view of our county, or a sprawl, and then the 2070 horizon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate you coming. But let me just ask you a quick question, if you don't mind. Obviously, I mean, you've outlined some of the concerns that a lot of people have, even people on this board. The big question is, what's the alternative? How do you do it without stepping on people's rights? So I'm interested to hear your solutions.
I think there are better ways for us to plan our growth and better boundaries and guidelines we can set for our developers. My personal belief is that development is a privilege and not a right. And so in my perspective, and having listened to some of the horizontal roundtables, we view the developers as our customer, and we've kind of forgot who bring us to the dance, and that's your residents in Pasco County. So to bring back citizen input into how the county develops, I think is primary. And then to look at better ways of planning. 45 lot lines, come on. Now we're talking 900 square foot houses so we can put even more properties into a smaller space. It's not healthy for our community. It's not healthy for what we are. It's not healthy for the future of our community. It's a huge impact on our schools. Our deferred impact fees are, my gosh, we're losing out on so much interest money just right there alone. I think that there are far better ways for us to be developing our county.
Okay, anybody else have any questions? No.
Well, just a reminder that the landowner is part of that equation.
Correct.
And so they have, well, that goes back to what you said, Mr. Chairman.
So if our large landowners had other alternatives or were aware of other alternatives rather than selling to development, that might be something we could look at as well.
I agree, but it's not just large landowners, it's landowners in general.
I don't think.
Just a reminder. So what's your definition of large?
I think when you get to over 100 acres, you're talking large land.
But we're reviewing properties that are less than that as well.
10, 14, 15
Yes,
acres.
20,
I agree.
50.
I agree, but most of those are not looking to do major subdivisions.
I would
That's not an
disagree with
Angeline.
that.
That's not a, a connected city.
No, I understand, but I'm referring to something like one thing on our agenda today is Orange State. That's not, it's less than 100 acres that has townhomes on it. And I'm not debating it, I'm just saying that the landowner is part of that equation, so they have property rights. And you're right, it's a hard balance to figure out.
Exactly, and I think that there has to be a lot of really thoughtful evaluation and balancing of our infrastructure along with how we develop. Our infrastructure is lagging, dramatically lagging. I'm sure with schools, you're more than well aware of that. Our schools are stuffed to the brim in most of our cities. And so I think that if we were to stop pushing so hard and take a little bit more of an introspective look at what's happening and a little more planned look, I know we could probably go back to the ULI reports and glean some new insights there. It's always fun when you go back and reread something, you find something new. So I think that there's some alternatives that we could explore. Anybody else have a question for me?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yep. All right, Denise?
Ms. Hazelwood would also like to
Oh,
speak in
okay.
public comment.
I didn't see your hand go up, Ms. Hazelwood.
She didn't, because
No.
she needs to.
She beat you to it, huh?
Nancy Hazelwood, 34110, A Nice Place, Dade City. I'm kind of echoing something accidentally that she's saying. The people in Northeast Pasco have been asking for meetings with county staff, particularly planning, but with the turnover, because of the turnover in staff, they haven't always caught up with the rural area plan and don't quite take it into consideration. The development community and sometimes staff seems not to be aware that they're influencing and affecting the Northeast Rural Plan, and in some cases ignore it. Maybe it'll go away and nobody will notice. So their projects are going to affect the Northeast Rural Area Plan. And there's a project coming up, maybe 2 of them later today. So that's one thing I want to say. The other thing is I was wondering if the county couldn't put together a workshop on how many MPUDs can be put in Pasco County before the county's natural resources become compromised. I know there are a few citizens that would like to attend anything like that going on. I'd like to see more workshops on where we're growing to and what's going on and have our input into this. I'm sure if we all put our heads together, we can come up with some answers that can make this a better county than what seems to be happening today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. I think we can start with the regular agenda then.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Planning Commission members. Denise Hernandez, Planning and Development. Planning and Economic Growth, I always forget to say that. So today we are going to start with the addendum agenda, PC 7, and that's PEG 247694. It's a zoning amendment, State Road 54 and Lake Crystal, MPUD, Master Plan Unit Development, Interstate Homes, LLC, and others. The request is to continue the item to the May 2nd, 2024 Planning Commission meeting at 1:30 in Dade City.
Okay, is the applicant present? Anyone here to object? No one? Next.
Following item is PC 8, PEG 247683. It's a zoning amendment in the name of Crossways MPUD, Crossways 301 LLC. The request is to continue the item to a date uncertain.
Okay.
And Denise, that one staff initiated?
That is staff initiated
That's related to utilities?
as related to not receiving documentation that has been requested.
It'll be rescheduled on this side.
It will when it goes back up, and it will have to be renoticed, reposted, everything else, because the request is to continue to a date certain.
Okay. So is the applicant present? Anyone here to object? No, so, you see no one? Okay, are those the only two?
Those are the two continuances you have on your agenda today.
Okay. Have a motion?
Move to continue item PC7 to the May 2nd Planning Commission meeting in Dade City, and item PC8 to a date uncertain.
Second.
Have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? Okay.
All right, we're going to move on to item PC2, and that is PEG 247780. It's a zoning amendment in the names of Russell K. and Leanne Finlay for a change in zoning from an AC district, agricultural, to a C2 general commercial district with a voluntarily agreed upon deed restriction as shown in your finding of fact number 2, which limits the uses on the property, also requires specific site plan requirements, the use of lighting that is more consistent with dark sky, and also includes the Live Local Act deed restriction. Comes to you with a recommendation of approval.
The applicant present? Anyone here to object?
I'd like to hear that case, please.
Okay, so we're going to pull PC2.
Item PC3, we're going to pull that one because there's someone who has signed up to speak on that item.
Okay.
We're going to move on to PC4. PC4 is PEG 247737, sorry, PEG 247737. It's a zoning amendment in the name of Orange State MPUD, Master Plan Unit Development, Orange State Enterprises, Inc. It's a substantial modification to the approved Orange State MPUD Master Plan to allow the development of 11 townhomes on approximately 3.07 acres. Comes to you with a recommendation of approval with conditions as included in your agenda packet.
All right, is the applicant present?
The applicant is virtually present, I believe.
Okay, the applicant's virtually present. Anyone here to object? I see no objections.
We're going to pull PC5 as there are several folks here who have signed up to speak on that item. So we're going to move on to PC6,
Okay.
which is PEG 240295. It's a development agreement in the name of Chapel Crossings MPUD Master Plan Unit Development, Thornwood Associates LLC. It's for a modification to the development agreement for the Chapel Crossings MPUD. Comes to you with a recommendation that you find it consistent with the Pasco County Comprehensive Plan and recommend approval to the Board of County Commissioners. You're sitting as the LPA on this item.
All right, is the applicant present? Anyone here to object? I see no objection.
And that concludes your consent agenda.
All right, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as amended, consisting of PC4 and PC6.
Second.
We have a motion in 2 seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign?
I know we're going to move on to PC2 first, but I do want some housekeeping items before my colleagues come up for PC3 and PC5. On PC3, for the record, which is PEG 247712, there were ex parte communications with all the Planning Commission members but for Mr. Gray. And on PC5, PEG 267639, there were ex parte communications with all the Planning Commission members also, with the exception of Mr. Gray. Those have all been submitted to the clerk's office for their records.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Liam Devine, Planning and Economic Growth. This is item PC2, PEG 24-7780 in the name of Russell K. and Leanne Finlay. The proposal is a Euclidean rezoning from an AC agricultural district to C2 general commercial district. The future land use is currently Res 6, although I would like to note the board is hearing a comp plan amendment on Tuesday, April 10th. for commercial, which you guys have seen before and recommended approval for. The proposed use for the property is to develop the property with a small commercial center with approximately 21,000 square feet in conformance with the C2 General Commercial District standards, and the subject site is located on the east side of US Highway 301 and approximately 200 feet north of Marquet Drive. The subject site is located in the North Market area and is located in Area 3, the rural character area, and is outside of the urban concentration areas. Here is our context map. There are several trails in the area. Here's a little bit more zoomed in of that context. And a closer zoomed in aerial. The surrounding future land use is Res 6. And the surrounding zoning to the north and east is AC, to the south is RMH and R2, and to the west is AC and C2. The subject site is undeveloped on approximately 3.49 acres, and as stated before, CPAS 2212 will be heard by the Board of County Commissioners on April 10th. Access to the property is from US 301, which is an FDOT maintained arterial road, and the applicant has volunteered to record deed restrictions as provided in your agenda packet. These are the same deed restrictions that were presented at the comp plan hearing. And this is coming with recommendation for approval from Planning and Economic Growth. I'm here if you have any questions.
Any questions from the audience here?
Sure. So, did the applicant actually proffer these restrictions on uses, or were they asked to agree to these restrictions on uses?
So I can't speak for my long-range planning services staff, but the applicant can certainly, I believe staff asked if they would be willing to volunteer to agree to those deed restrictions as presented in your packet, but I'll let the applicant speak since that was with our long-range planning folks and was noted from their comments.
Okay. Well, we'll wait to hear from the applicant.
Well, for one of them, the Live Local one, I can tell you that the board
I
has
understand.
directed that
I
to occur.
won't be going to the Live Local, I promise.
Okay.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Ann Pollock, 433 Central Avenue in St. Pete, representing the owners today on this application. I wanted to thank Liam for the presentation and give you a little more context on what we're proposing here. The Finleys own a HVAC repair business, and they want to open up a shop to sell the parts and to do repairs. He'd like to use the remainder of the proposed development to lease out to other tradesmen and professionals for office space and retail space up here. He's requesting C2 because this would allow his proposed use, and that is sort of the initial reason that we came in with the C2. We feel that the use is compatible with the area. It's located on 301. There's a wide variety of uses in the surrounding area, including pastures and residences, but also plenty of commercial uses. Surrounding development in the vicinity of a commercial nature is older, less regulated in design and impact, and includes things like used car sales, truck sales, open storage, outdoor industry, and that sort. This approval will allow for commercial development in an area that already has some commercial, but to be a much of an improvement to the area. It will provide a commercial center that allows retail and these uses and satisfy the business and commercial needs of the surrounding residents. Currently, in the surrounding area, there are, like I said, some pretty intense commercial uses, and what we're proposing here is much less intense. But in addition, we have agreed to that deed restriction. The county did ask initially, as they were reviewing this, if we would add those uses. and
Are these
restrict them.
The last time you were here, I think you referred to them as dirty uses?
That's what how the county had referred to them as dirty uses, yeah. But really what we find is the most impactful uses that are allowed in the C2 zoning are the ones that are being prohibited. So these include car washes, used vehicle sales, standalone warehousing, auto repair garages, lumber yards, and a lot of sales of items that you would generally have the equipment outside that you're selling. So in addition to that, the remaining C2 uses generally within the code require that those be located internal to the business. And so that's what we're proposing here as well, uses that are essentially indoors. This is a concept plan that we're looking at. Of course, we have to meet all county requirements, including building and fire code. We've agreed to the deed restriction regarding parking and lighting, and expect to provide buffering and landscaping and screening along the edges, particularly where it abuts residential property. To the extent that the additional stormwater pond that's proposed there essentially provides a additional setback from the residential properties. The last thing I really want to get into, and then I'm here, of course, for questions, is that this is a project that will bring jobs to the area. You mentioned Live Local, and I know the county has really been making an effort to move away from just being a bedroom community to ensuring that we have commercial uses coming into appropriate areas. And in this case, not only, of course, the deed restriction will limit him from using Live Local and developing residential, but the goal is here to allow him to build his business and to provide space for other people in the area. So his current business has 4 employees. He expects to need 6 more if he's able to open up his shop here. So that addition to the 6 or 8 other spaces that would be coming in would allow for additional jobs and economic development in this area. So we do think that it complements the area, that we are providing the limitations in order to limit any impacts, and that ultimately it will be a benefit to the county and to the community. So thank you so much.
Can you show your site plan? Can you show the proposed site plan?
Yeah. We initially had the access on both to the north and the south, but we met with the neighbor to the east and who uses that northern driveway.
So is this the site plan you actually desire to construct?
I don't know that that will ultimately be what is constructed. Maybe it's 2 buildings instead of 1. But generally something to that extent. But again, as we go through the site development process and fine tune what comes in, that's what we'd be doing.
Here's where I'm going with this. There's, as part of the quote voluntary deed restriction, you're agreeing to put the parking on the side of the building or at the rear of the building, not front of the building. But I see a site plan here where the parking's at the front of the building, which isn't uncommon. That's what I would expect from a retail strip center.
So we
especially one out in a rural area where the tenants can be seen from the roadway so that they are known that they're there and that they can be successful businesses. And I'm trying to figure out why we're trying to require an urban form of retail development in a quite rural area when I think it will be to the detriment of your client's tenants. I'm trying to figure out why we would require such a thing.
I think based on first of all, the deed restriction actually allows for a single, as shown here with a single side of parking on the front. in order to allow for the full driveway that drives around. And we asked for this particularly because we weren't going to use the northern driveway in order to protect the neighbor. So we put in language to allow that small row of parking on the front. But, and of course, I can't speak exactly to the county's desires here, but based on my conversations, the goal is to to sort of set a precedent for future development in this area. They're looking at the Lakuchi plan and really trying to incorporate new design guidelines as part of this. And so that's what we're willing to do that if it helps the community, but. Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate your honesty.
Any other questions?
I'm going to have questions for staff.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions up here? Nope. All right. Is there anybody like to speak against it? Have questions about it? Okay, I don't see anyone. So we have questions for staff?
Sure. Going to have a few. I guess the first one is, why are we trying to impose an urban form of development in a very rural area? And the next question, because I'm sure it's going to tie in, is that in this deed restriction, they're, quote, voluntarily agreeing that they'll comply with any approved Greater Lakuchi Community Plan, which I'd swear you testified to this board was a non-binding concept plan. So it's either binding or it's not.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Terry?
Chairman. Terry Pitos, Planning and Economic Growth. This portion of US 301 is being planned for expansion. The intensity levels along US 301 are not going to be, they're not now considered rural, and they're not probably going to be rural once 301 is fully expanded. But more than that, this is in the East Market area, and the East Market area looks for small town formulation of buildings. So in this particular context, we had neighbors to the north and east concerned about the proximity of the use. Staff and the developer worked to bring the building as close as possible to US 301 while still providing parking at the front of the building for ease of use. Understanding that, yes, this is not urban, but it can have town-like dimensions. So I think that would help explain.
So the main reason to bring it closer to the road was to provide a bigger buffer to the surrounding.
One reason.
So can you tell me about why the uses that you're asking them to restrict against are dirty uses?
I've never characterized them as dirty uses. I think I said that at the comp plan stage, where I wouldn't have used that term, dirty uses. So I don't necessarily consider them dirty uses.
So then what's so offensive about these uses that they couldn't be at this location?
Some of these uses are may contain nuisance issues, like for example, a lumber yard. Maybe too loud.
What's a nuisance about a lumber yard?
Noise.
Noise.
But others of these uses may be associated with low employment generation along the 301 frontage.
Nobody works at the lumber yard?
No, they do. So I can't speak to all the uses and what the rationale was to limit them specifically. But
Or
these
did
were
they
the
just
agreed
pick
upon
them out of
uses.
the air? I mean, somebody came up with the list of uses.
So I can tell you, these deed restrictions were worked out prior to the zoning stage and was presented in your comp plan amendment packet. I believe that they were using similar uses that the board has approved and tried to stay away from. And that's where I believe that staff was pulling some of those uses from similar deed restrictions, from other directive, from.
Well, I'm questioning some of those. If I could ask Mr. Peppers, I gave you a file that had use photos. So I'm trying to figure out what's offensive about the lawnmower sale. How that's going to disrupt the character of the community.
That's one of the exceptions.
Yep. Could we go to the next photo? Oh, okay, so if lawnmowers are offensive and they have things displayed outdoors, what about the place that sells the jet skis and the ATVs? Is that an allowed use? Is that offensive? Can I have the next photo? What about tractors, since we're up in the rural area near Lapucci? Are those much different than lawnmowers? But those, we could put tractors out there, but we can't put lawnmowers out there. Can we go to the next photo? What about RV sales? That's down in Holiday. Is that a blight on the landscape? Any more so than the lawnmowers? How about the next photo? Used cars. CarMax, that's one of those buy here, pay here lots, right? And all they sell is used cars. I understand what we're trying to stop, but I think we need to work a little more on that language, or maybe we need to create a different zoning district to address those kinds of things, because I don't want to zone out CarMax. How about the next one? Oh, look, there's used cars too, and they're in a building. A glass building. We can see all those, but those are used cars. Next. What about equipment rentals? How's that different from the lawnmowers? But none of those are deed restricted out of here. We just pick on the lawnmowers and the used cars. Next. The lumber yard. They don't sell any lumber, but they sell shingles. Is that okay? They might have noise. They might have those forklifts that go beep, 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 you know, and they back up. Next. Same thing there. Building materials, stone, windows, siding, doors, no lumber. But all those could be there too. Next. How about pipe? Is that less offensive than lumber, the pipe? Next. There's more pipe, that's right there in Hudson. And the next one, this is my favorite one, the sheds. The sheds that the building department seems to have a problem if you want to put in your backyard because they're so worried about the hurricanes blowing the sheds away, but we can stack them all up on the side of the road. Is that less offensive than the lawnmowers? Or the septic tanks? Do we have a proliferation of septic tank sales yards in the county that we're trying to zone out? Because I haven't seen too many of those, especially on these. We don't sell too many septic tanks on all these 40-foot wide lots we approve. My problem is I want them to have a successful business. And we have a list of use that someone's arbitrarily decided they don't like for whatever reason or the other. I'm trying to figure out what's offensive about archery. All the noise that comes from that silent bow.
Indoors.
Yeah, an indoor archery range, right? Of course, you can't hear the indoor shooting range either that I like to go to. And used cars. God help us for the used cars. Do you remember during COVID when there was no new cars being manufactured and nobody could buy a new car? And we all needed used cars. So where are people supposed to buy used cars? We just had a bridge in the 5th largest port in this country go down that 750,000 cars come into, which means there's going to be a problem with getting new cars into the United States. So there might be a market for used cars. And I know the gentleman doesn't want to sell used cars. He wants to open his HVAC business. My problem with this is I'm seeing these deed restrictions getting inserted into every one of these MPUDs, and everybody's worried about traffic. Well, there's going to have to be a lot of traffic on the road for us all to go find a used car lot, because it's not going to be allowed here, and I'm going to have to drive 40 miles to find a used car. That's ridiculous. If we want to do something about what's offensive to us about used car lots, and I know what it is, it's Jack's Buy Pay Here, right? That's with all the feather banners and the cars parked up on the right-of-way. That's what we're offended by. Then we create restrictions, or send code enforcement out to go enforce the restrictions we already have on the books about those places. But I don't want to zone these places out or develop better codes and standards to address what you perceive to be offensive about these uses. I don't want to hamstring these people. I think these are common, everyday working people struggling. They're going to take their savings, their hard-earned savings, and they're going to try to build something so that they can build a business. They're out in a rural area, and all of a sudden we're trying to impose an urban design standard on them. We're trying to impose a plan that we get told is a non-binding concept plan. In fact, county commission didn't even want it coming back to us because it's a non-binding concept plan, but we're going to bind them to it. So I don't want to leave the impression that I'm against this development. I'm absolutely for it. I just don't want to hamstring this applicant with a bunch of deed restrictions, and I appreciate the live local one. I'm 100% in support of that. But I don't want to hamstring them with a bunch of restrictions when I can point out 20 other examples of things that would be, quote, just as offensive as these, quote, dirty uses that would absolutely be allowed because you didn't think of them or you didn't list them. And by the way, that took me about 15 minutes this morning to come up with those, so that's where I'm at with the case.
Okay. Any comments? Terry or Lamb?
This is a voluntary deed restriction.
Mhm.
If the applicant wanted to debate the removal of these uses from the list of the deed restriction, they could have entered into that debate. They themselves volunteered to agree to it. Some of these uses do appear in deed restrictions fairly regularly for various reasons, all case-by-case basis. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, it's a voluntary offered deed restriction.
Okay.
Well, I may be off base here a little bit, but I think part of what John is saying is making sure that they are voluntary and not, yeah, they agreed to it because it was suggested to them and it was a support. And I'm not saying that was the case here, right? I understand. But I think that's the point, not really trying to set the precedent of people knowing that they're going to be expected to do this when they come in. And it just truly needs to be voluntary, and I think that's come up multiple times here at these meetings.
What would you propose for a fix for this? What would you like to see? All C2 uses be allowed?
Yes, I think they should. We have a Euclidean zoning district that has these uses allowed in C2. If the staff or the Board of Commissioners feels like there should be uses that aren't or shouldn't be in the C2 district, then they should amend the allowable list of uses in the C2 district instead of doing this on a case-by-case-by-case-by-case basis. Or maybe they should be C1. Unfortunately, he wants to do HVAC. That's not allowed in the C1. He needs a C2 for a contractor's office. But I understand you say they're voluntary, but I know how this game works. You're going to volunteer to do this or you're not getting staff support when we come make the recommendation to the Planning Commission. I know how that works. I know how it works. This isn't my first rodeo. So I think they should be allowed to have the C2 uses. I don't actually think they have any intention of selling septic tanks out there. I don't think based on that site plan that they're going to be selling used cars. But you know, he's going to have an HVAC shop. I don't think it's unreasonable that maybe some guy's going to sell or fix lawnmowers. But you know, people have, if you buy a lawnmower and it breaks down, Somebody's got to be able to fix it. I don't know what's so offensive about fixing a lawnmower. Or fixing a car. I know, how many people rode the bus here today? We all drove our cars. All our cars need oil changes, they all need air filters, they all need tires. Sometimes they need other repairs. There has to be a place to get your car repaired. What's so offensive about getting cars repaired? So I don't think they should be restricted against such uses. I think they should be allowed, as we said at the outset of this meeting, there was some discussion about property rights, and I think they have the right to use the property.
According to the zoning.
According to the zoning, yes.
Liam, you want to add something?
I just have some I don't think a motion was made, but I would like to clarify something. I don't know if the comp plan, I know the comp plan amendment that was already approved, these deed restrictions were presented with. I don't think there's any sub-area policies or anything requiring them to do these deed restrictions in that comp plan amendment. I don't know if they didn't have these, if staff would have a different recommendation. But from what I'm hearing is, are you suggesting just to remove all of the deed restrictions except for live local?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify.
That would be my suggestion,
okay.
And if I were to make a motion, that's probably going to be my motion.
Okay. Then the only other thing, because this was a voluntary deed restriction, I would ask the applicant to come back up and say they're voluntarily agreeing to that as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I ask the applicant to come back up?
Yes.
If I were to make a motion to remove the deed restrictions against the uses and against the adherence to any greater Lakuchi plan and any requirement to put your parking on the side of the building, would you be opposed to that?
That does not include the live local.
I would still be asking them to voluntarily agree to include the live local deed restriction, yes.
We certainly would be supportive of having restrictions removed from development of this property. I think, like you said, we're not proposing any of the uses that are listed there, and we don't have any plans to put them in. But to the extent we have the freedom, I guess, the less restrictions, the better, of course, but we're committing that that's not what we're planning on building anyway. And the intent is to comply with the code as it is. So, to the extent that there are code provisions that have limits on lighting or parking, we would certainly comply with that as well.
We have land development code requirements already that address shoebox style lights. I actually thought that was kind of funny. We want to impose an urban style of development, but we're worried about dark skies because we're out in the rural area. So
I would just say that to the extent this affects our comprehensive plan amendment, we're still trying to have both approved and not. It was the planners there that asked for this, and I don't want to throw us under the bus by getting rid of this and potentially, losing support for the comprehensive plan amendment. So, that would be, if there's any.
I make the presumption that if the board, we make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. Whatever we vote on here is not binding on the commissioners. It's a recommendation to the commissioners, and the commissioners, I'm sure they'll come to their own conclusions, but that would be my recommendation.
We have the hearing before the board on the comp plan amendment next week, so
Okay.
we would just
Well, I know the commissioners
raise that.
listen to these meetings, so.
All right.
Yeah, ultimately you make a good point, because it's not so much about what this particular owner is trying to do, it's if they ever sell a property for whatever reason, now they're not limited to what they can sell for. the new property owners can come in and do whatever is allowable in C2's district. So that's going to help your client.
Well, I think the bigger issue for me is, why are we doing this on a, we're all of a sudden in the last 2 years zoning by deed restriction. I got the idea we moved to Houston, not Pasco County. We have a zoning code. We have listed permitted uses in our Euclidean zoning code. If there are ones that we don't think ought to be in there, well, then maybe we need to go and hold public hearings and amend the zoning code. But we're doing this on a parcel by parcel by parcel basis. So if his property across the street was already zoned C2, he gets to do this, but you can't do it because you came in later.
Well, I want to be clear though, for Live Local, we don't have that option.
I understand.
Because the state came in and said,
I understand. This has nothing to do with Live Local.
well, I understand, but I'm saying you can't completely get rid of deed restrictions for that reason, because the state told us we can't. Doesn't matter whether we change the zoning code. Our zoning doesn't even allow multifamily in C2, but state says we have to. So the only way we can control that is by deed restriction.
I completely understand.
I just didn't want you to think that we can get rid of them completely.
I think there are reasons why under any application we would want to restrict certain uses. There may be reasons, maybe legitimate reasons, but I don't think there is any reason necessarily in this case to make wholesale restrictions without reason.
And that's what I'm saying, is I don't have any good reason here not to do that. And I'm in a rural area.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of thinking maybe septic tanks you might sell out here.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that for having grown up in this county, it's probably been decades and decades since I've driven by a roadside septic tank sales yard. I haven't seen many of those proliferating around the county.
It's coming.
Well, it's coming.
I currently take my lawnmower to Brooksville, so there's nothing but a lawnmower place right there.
Okay, I think we've asked the audience if there's anybody who wants to speak. All right, has anybody been missed? Amy?
I'd move to recommend approval of item PC2 to the Board of County Commissioners, removing all of the deed restrictions with the recommendation not to require the voluntary deed restrictions other than the applicant's gracious voluntary proffer of the Live Local restriction.
Okay.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second. I assume there's no further discussion. If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay, motion carries.
Good afternoon, Amy Tull with Planning and Economic Growth. So the item before you is actually PEG 24-7712. It's an MPUD rezoning in the name of Katie 52. As Denise noted, there were ex partes that were given to the clerk's office already for this item. So the applicant is proposing a rezoning petition from AC Agricultural District, R1MH, Single Family Mobile Home District, and C2 General Commercial District to MPUD Master Plan Unit Development District. That was too far. On approximately 785 acres. The applicant is actually, so this the name of Katie 52 is actually the second phase of what is called Gateway Hub over at the northwest intersection of State Road 52 and I-75. The first phase came in for single-family developments and non-residential uses in the name of Hillcrest. That was previously approved a couple years ago. So this is the second phase coming in to implement
The other various subcategories within the Gateway Hub future land use classification, including the mixed use, interstate subcategory, multifamily subcategory, and single family subcategory. I believe there's office in there as well. So given that perspective or given that information, the purpose of this rezoning is to develop 190,000 square feet of retail commercial, 3 million square feet of light industrial, 500,000 square feet of office, 250 hotel room, 1,550 multifamily apartments, 150 townhomes, 600 single-family homes, and 27 single-family estate homes. Again, this is approximately on 785 acres, located on the north side of State Road 52 west of I-75. So as you can see, the subject site's located in the South Market area and urban expansion area. Here's an aerial view of the proximity. There's also the Orange Belt Trail that's running through the proposed development. There's various conditions within your MPUD, conditions of approval, that speak to the maintenance, construction, and implementation of the Orange Belt Trail. This is a overview, probably about a 1 mile scale overview of the surrounding area. So to the north of the subject site is rural area 1, northeast rural. To the west is your rural area 2, which is your transition area. To the south, you're going to have an area that's rural area 4, and then connected city is going to be on the southeast quadrant. So again, we did our 1 mile proximity evaluation on the already existing MPUDs within the area. Here's just an overview of some of the approvals that came in with Connected City and CPEV and Hillcrest and some of the areas. This is capturing, again, the entitlements that are proposed within the KD 52, and then highlighting some of the already existing approved entitlements that fall within the 1 mile proximity of the proposed MPUD. And if you have questions on what those look like, I can give you some of those answers as well. So again, existing zoning is AC, R1MH, and C2 with AC to the north and existing MPUD to the west, MPUD to the south, and then at the intersection there's also various C2 and commercial zoning districts. The existing future land use being Gateway Hub. There's agricultural residential to the north, which is going to be our northeast rural area with Res 1s. Also to the south is ROR, Gateway Hub, and industrial, and then to the east as well as an employment center industrial. So the subject site is primarily surrounded by employment generating uses with some lower density and medium density residential. This is the MPUD master plan that they're proposing. In the shaded areas, those are going to be the boundaries of the quote-unquote subcategories that are defined within your Gateway Hub future land use classification. So the peach is going to be your interstate employment and mixed use subcategory. To the south, it's going, the orangish, burnt orange color is going to be your corporate business park. The lighter yellow is multifamily, single family in the brighter yellow, and then up at the top, northeast corner is a single family estate, which is going to be a larger pods of single family. This is the Orange Belt Trail in blue that is going to run up from Old Pasco Road and State Road 52. It is going to head along the interior arterial collector roadways to the east, and it is projected to be constructed under I-75. There's an accompanying EDA or an economic development agreement that will be presented with this at the time of the board hearing to ensure that the construction, maintenance, and implementation of the Orange Belt Trail is achieved in this area. And then there is the green star there is representing a potential additional signal that the applicant has stated in one of their conditions at time of development. Once they do another review of it and it's warranted, they will go ahead and provide that signalization there. So the applicant, due to the scale and the proximity and the uses of the site, is proposing variation requests to the code Section 402.5D is just a variation requesting that they get a waiver from any alcohol sales if they propose alcohol based on its proximity to parks, churches, those types of uses. So that's just a traditional, just in case. LDC section 805.6, that is going to be your maintenance of the CDD and HOA, that traditional condition that we have in place. The maintenance of the wetlands and whatnot and open spaces will be under one entity, so it still meets the intent of the code. Section 901.6011, continuation of streets. They are requesting a potential variation because to the north, it is all Category 1 wetlands, and so there is a limitation to where that can occur. So they just wanted to go ahead and make note of that. Section 905.1E for the amount of land required. This is for your park space within the multifamily. So they're just asking for a reduction in park spaces for the multifamily development. 905.25 site perimeter and landscaping. They're requesting to limit or remove some of the landscaping where your non-residential uses are adjacent to each other, which essentially is due to if you have commercial uses in proximity, we're going to remove those landscaping to make sure it's more walkable urban environment. And then site perimeter, 907.1E parking facilities. They're requesting a reduction in parking for the multifamily to 1.7, and they're also requesting a reduction for 1.7 parking spaces in the corporate center for those areas where multifamily is to occur, where it's vertically integrated. So with that, we recommend approval of the requested zoning request with conditions to the Board of County Commissioners, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have on the proposed site.
All right, any questions?
I'll have some after.
Amy, did you cover the fact that the fire rescue condition is still being negotiated?
There is a condition number 16 is currently being modified. It does enable or have a condition that speaks to where a fire service site would be located, and the credits and fees that would be assessed at that point in time. We're still kind of modifying that just to make sure that the fire services budgets adequately for that facility when that site is needed. So, and that is also a finding in your agenda memo.
Just letting you know that the language about that site is likely to change between now and the board, because
yeah,
it was the only condition where staff and the applicant were totally in agreement as of the date of this hearing, so they asked to proceed with that negotiation still occurring.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Dahl? No? Thank you, Amy.
Was the staff supporting the alternative standard requests?
Yes.
Okay.
Staff was in support of this.
All right, and the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, Clark Hobby and Hobby PA, 109 North Rush Street, Tampa, Florida. Been sworn. First want to start off, I have been sworn at many times here, but I have been sworn in today. I wanted to first thank staff. I was looking back at my files today. I think we had our pre-application meeting on the comp plan amendment that led up to the MPUD on this thing. I want to say it was 2.5 years ago. So this has been something we've been working on a very long period of time with staff, and it's a pretty complicated project because of the nature of the overlay that we're in, the Gateway Hub. And so thank you to Amy, David, and Terry, and Elizabeth Blair worked on the comp plan amendment stuff with us as well. So thank you to staff. So we're excited to be here today. If we could put that master plan back up, that would be great. What we've been working on these last 2.5 years is to take the existing Gateway Hub policies that existed for this site for about 15 years and to really do two major things. We're trying to create a very large scale employment generating use along the interstate, and then we wanted to significantly lessen the amount of multifamily area that could have been built in the previous subcategories. So the area that you see along the interstate that says interstate employment and mixed use area, We worked with staff. That area would have already allowed significant residential entitlements, and we eliminated all of the residential in that area. And what's going to end up happening as a result is we're going to end up with, I think it's somewhere between 375 and 400 acres of large-scale light industrial employment in that area. So it's regionally significant, not just for Pasco, but really for the Bay Area. It could be a very large employer and employment node there, which if you look at the original policies for Gateway Hub, that's really what the county's been looking for in this area for many, many years. Prior to Gateway Hub, there had been ROR on a large amount of this property for a long time, and then a portion of it had employment center as well. As I said, the focal point is the employment area along the interstate, but there's a couple of other very significant things that we're going to do that we feel like is going to be great for the county over the long haul and great for the area. The first is to encourage the employment generating uses. We're going to build an extension of Old Pasco Road that you see on the map. And right out of the gate, we're going to build what I call like a North Point style 4-lane road, like a boulevard coming up all the way to the T in the middle of the site. That's in a first phase improvement, and that's a major improvement. And we're working with economic development folks here to try to bring along an incentive agreement that will help us do that. At the same time, as Amy mentioned, we're building a major extension of the Orange Belt Trail alongside that road and then alongside the east-west road. And we build under the interstate and the long planned extension of Aussie Murphy over to Pasco Road on the east side of 75 to Lincoln over by the Target Distribution Center. So these are major county objectives, some of which have existed for 20-25 years that the project's going to be fulfilling. So we're very excited about doing that kind of thing. As I mentioned, we also significantly limited not just the amount of multifamily, but the site has a lot less single family that could have been allowed on the site from the get-go. And we did that purposefully. The master development company is Hines, and an affiliate of Hines, and while they plan on having some nice upscale building in the single family area that you see on the map, what we didn't want to do is adhere to the previous plans, which had a very, very large of only multifamily in there. We want the multifamily areas where it says multiple family and in the corporate center so that they're proximate to where the jobs and the commercial uses are going to be in the corporate center area. So again, a lot of work has gone into it, and the last thing I'd point out, when we started the project and part of our partnership with the county, that's something I believe is really good for a lot of the county asked us to go back and look at where that green star is, right where it says Old Pasco Road. That's actually where the access point is to Tampa Bay Golf and Country Club. And there's kind of an existing unsafe condition in that area for the retirees who are living at Tampa Bay Golf and Country Club. Part of what we agreed to do is as soon as the signal is warranted, we're going to go ahead and build a second signal there. So we'll have access to 2 signals at 52, and the folks at Tampa Bay Golf and Country Club will be able to get out much more safely than they do now and go westbound on 52. So that's just a small smattering of what's all in this very long approval document, but there's a lot of good here for the county, and there's a lot of positive things for our client, and we believe our neighbors. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay.
If not, I'll hold my fire till we have any.
All right,
folks have
thank you.
Sure. Well, I'll wait.
All right, is there anybody from the audience who'd like to speak?
Nancy Hayeswood, 34110 Nice Place. My issue is the Northeast Rural. I would like to see a map of exactly what they've planned as a transition area in between the northern part and Northeast Rural. and to have them explain how they're going to handle that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? See no one? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, this is Clark Hobby again. I think I can answer that without having an additional map. For the Planning Commission's benefit, one of the members of the joint venture that is the developer of the site owns a significant amount of acreage north of this site, and I believe it's over 1,000 acres, and they're anticipating that that site will probably be in a mitigation area in the short term, so it won't be developed, so there won't be any impact on the northeast Pasco area. And the one portion of the site in the very northwest corner that says single-family estate, that would allow for 27 units at 1 unit per acre over there. But as you can see, it's cut off by a Category 1 wetland. And so it's our intention to probably just use that site for floodplain compensation. So there won't, and in the middle, I'm sorry, that's a big lake and peat mining area, the carve out in the middle that is owned by the same family. So there's not going to be any direct adjacent development next to Northeast Pasco at all. So that's how we're transitioning down.
Okay.
At the northeast side of the site is the joint venture partner that's owns property off-site. Is that a wetland today?
And north of that site,
you were saying that they were going to make a mitigation.
North of the area where it says interstate employment mixed use area, the Cruzen family through one of their entities owns that property, and they're intending to probably have a mitigation bank in that area. What I'm asking is that proposed mitigation bank area already a wetland? A portion of the site is a wetland, and there's a fair amount of uplands up there also. It's a ranch, and so it's a combination, but I think they intend on making, I think it's a combination mitigation bank area, but they're probably going to get some credits for uplands that are conserved, and they may be doing some wetland creation up there. But the wetland you see on the very north boundary does go into a portion of their site.
Okay. Question. PM 26. We've had a big debate since the Hale Collier case about the minimum width of lots. And then there was an agreement with the Builders Association to make them 45s. And then we got this case. And all of a sudden they're 30. If they're rear loaded. So I'm trying to figure out, how are we allowing 30-foot lots now, or proposing to allow 30-foot wide lots? Where'd that come from?
Well, Mr. Moody, if I might, because I was a big part of the discussion with the memo, PM 26 and the previous 21, it was widely discussed at the board level that the board really does not have a concern about the width of alley-loaded product. And it was, Commissioner Starkey in particular during those discussions was encouraging us to have virtually any width as long as it's alley-loaded. So there's been, the two memos that have been adopted have all been about regulating the width of front-loaded only single-family detached and townhomes.
Well, I'm not sure if I agree with that, but I mean, that's why we agreed. And we see this standard condition in almost every MPUD that comes through here, that if more than 50% of the lots are 40-foot wide, they'll be rear loaded. And I see actually that condition's in here, but that condition doesn't address 30-foot wide lots. And I'm trying to figure out why do we all of a sudden need 30-foot wide lots?
I'm not sure that.
I mean, there was a discussion, there was a stakeholder group, and the settlement was on 45-foot wide lots. And today we're being asked to do 30-foot wide lots, whether they're rear loaded or not. Actually, I'll ask you some questions about that too. I saw that the setback for a rear loaded lot's 15 feet. So I'm trying to figure out, if I put my GMC Sierra in the 15-foot driveway, where's the back end of my truck? I guess it's hanging out in that alley. So I'm trying to figure out how Commissioner Waitman gets his garbage truck down down the alley if my GMC's hanging out with only a 15-foot setback back there? I'm trying to figure out how that works.
Well, to get to the issue of the settlement, I do think Mr. Pito should address whether rear-loaded lots were even subject to that requirement. 'Cause it's been a while since I looked at PM 26. I thought there was an exception for rear-loaded lots, but
There is.
we can get maybe Mr. Pitos to confirm that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm waiting for the PM 26 memo to load on my computer here. Generally speaking, the rear-loaded lots were exempted from the. Get this memo. To answer the question directly, can you repeat it one more time?
I was just of the understanding that the minimum lot size post PM 26 was going to be 45 foot. If they were going to do 40s, they needed to be rear loaded. If they were pre PM 26, maybe that's a misunderstanding on my part, but, and you know, and I still to this day don't agree with 40 and 45-foot lots. I said very publicly during the Hale Collier, I'm done with 40 and 50-foot wide lots. That being said, the board's decided 45-foot wide lots. That's beyond me, but today the proposal's 30.
Well, that's why I asked Mr. Pete just to clarify what was actually agreed to in PM 26, because there were exceptions to the 45-foot lot requirement. I just don't remember them all. I think there was one for retirement communities, I believe 55-plus communities weren't subject to that requirement, and there may have been others. So,
well, I don't see any retirement community mentioned in this document.
Well, I believe rear loader was also accepted too, but again, Mr. Pitos he's the author of that memo, so I think he should speak to it.
It's actually a 10-foot setback.
10 foot. So great, so my 20-foot truck will hang 10 feet into the alley. That's 12 feet wide.
It's a 10-foot front, 10-foot rear.
Yeah. So
15 from the corner.
under the standards for the 45-foot wide lot, the MPUD may propose other options to deviate from the 45-foot wide lot requirement here, which shall never be less than 40-foot wide lots with higher landscaping and green space requirements as identified in the MPUD COAs. Rear loaded lots, however, could be less than 45s. It could be 40s, because in the previous.
You said shall not be less than 40, right?
It shall not be less than 40. Yeah.
So is 30 less than 40?
30 is less than 40, but the key point of the memo is that the board had an applicability clause associated with that memo, so that if an MPUD application that was already in queue had already received its first round of comments to conduct its review as of August 8, 2023, they were being exempted from that.
So this was a queue prior to that?
Yeah.
Okay. But we're under no obligation to recommend approval of 30-foot wide lots. That just says that they can still ask for them in their MPUD. You're under no obligation here to actually approve those.
Correct.
Or recommend approval.
Yes, you don't have any obligation to recommend approval of anything.
Okay.
But Terry, I guess the question I had for you was, I distinctly recall an exception for 55-plus communities. Was there a similar exception for either T&D or rear-loaded lots?
Yes, so developments with 40, except in TUD, T&D, TOD, or 55-plus communities, PG will not support any front-loaded 40-foot wide lots and will not support any project that proposes more than 50% 45-foot wide front-loaded single-family detached lots.
So I guess the question
T&D,
is, I don't know if rear-loaded enough was to make it
Yeah.
T&D, but I guess the question was it your intent or the board's intent to subject 55-plus communities, T&D, TOD to that minimum 40-foot lot requirement?
Well, the memo states.
45-foot lot, I'm sorry.
Yeah, specifically, the policy memo that the board approved was stating that DDD will support project proposals that include 40-foot wide lots in 55-plus communities, age-restricted communities, provided the tree and landscaping requirements are met as defined in the tree and landscaping requirements of the memo. Additionally, 55-plus communities are subject to the driveway, street type, and parking sections of the policy memo. These communities may be up to 100% of said lots and may be front-loaded.
Okay, but what does it say about T and D?
That we would support project proposals that include 40-foot wide lots in T&D and TOD developments.
They would include what size lots? I'm sorry.
40-foot wide lots.
So I guess getting to Mr. Moody's question, is there anything in the memo that says that you would support 30-foot wide lots in T and D?
As rear-loaded product, I mean, or just in general?
Well, let's just presume that T and D is equivalent to rear loaded. Okay, I really understand that's an overgeneralization.
Yeah.
But my question really is there anything in the memo that says that staff would support lots smaller than 40 feet in T and D or rear loaded?
That did come up during the conversations at the board meeting, and one of the expert testimonies that were given noted that a 30-foot wide lot that was rear loaded could present just as nicely in a community as a 40 or a 50-foot wide lot might, because the rear loaded lot would have space in front of the unit that would have the green space that the board was looking for. It would have the pedestrian connectivity in the front. It would have the on-street parking capability. And so the argument that was being made at that board meeting was that the form was appropriate and scaled to the right-of-way. It wasn't that the lot width itself would solve or be the sole factor that would.
I'm not trying to get into what was discussed at the meeting. I'm trying to figure out, Mr. Moody's question and my question are both the same, which is, what does PM 26 require or not require as it relates to T and D or rear loaded lots? That's my question.
I was just going to point at this, Clark Hobby again for the record. I was just going to point out again, PM 26 does not apply to this project. We are voluntarily complying with almost all of it anyway. PM 10 applies to this project, and it has the language about the 40-foot lots that Mr. Moody's rightly concerning himself with, but it also has the following statement: flexibility shall be given for alley-loaded and rear-loaded development. And we heard the board say, and numerous members, and again, it's not, maybe it may not have been codified in a later memo, that the board was much less concerned about the width of alley-loaded product. And you know, Commissioner Starkey keeps saying over and over again, I don't care how wide it is as long as it's alley-loaded. So we did build 36, the Heinz company built 36-story, 36-foot wide alley-loaded product, T&D, in Astoria, and it was very successful. And I think that's probably why they...
So is it accurate to say, just to conclude what PM 26, I understand you're not subject to it.
Right,
okay.
Understand.
But just on a going forward basis, so the Planning Commission understands, PM 26 explicitly blesses 40-foot lots for T&D. It doesn't explicitly bless lots smaller than 40 for T&D.
And I think that's, again, this is a good catch by Mr. Moody, because I think he's raising a valid point. I think PM 26 may not have carried over that flexibility statement either. So if you read it literally, it may not say that anything below than 40 is allowed. Or does it? Okay.
Well, and you said Heinz built a 36-foot wide product. looking at this, you know, you can go to as low as 30 foot wide if it's rear loaded with a 5 foot side setback on each side.
Right.
So that means a 20 foot wide product.
Double wide mobile home's 24.
So that's.
I'm sorry,
Right, it's a 30 foot lot with a 5 foot side setback, so that's 10 feet, so it makes for.
I'm gonna get Brian Surek here, because knows a lot more about the product
40 feet.
layouts than
You're
I
also
do.
looking at a rear set, so it's rear loaded rear setback of 10 feet with the garage setback being actually 8 feet. So there's definitely no way of keeping anything in the driveway with that.
So, maybe you can, if there's a question, if you don't mind.
Who do we have? Who's at this?
Yeah, Brian Surek with Clearview Land Design. I have been sworn.
Brian, did you want to say something?
It sounded like there were questions about the very specific stuff about the setbacks and stuff like that, so maybe if there's a
Just
question
looking at
and
how small the rear loaded lot is, you know, in this particular approval, it's requesting a minimum lot size of 30 feet wide, 90 feet deep, and with a side setback for detached of 5 feet on each side. So you're talking about
40 feet.
You're talking about 30 foot wide lot. You're talking about a 20 foot wide building that you can put there. I mean, can you build something 20 feet wide?
Sure.
the T&D, that's doable.
The question is, do we want it? But what about the setbacks? So
It's a rear loaded
what's the rear loaded setback?
It's 10 feet, and the garage setback in the rear is actually 8 feet. So the garage can be as far as.
I'm trying to figure out how I take my GMC Sierra that's almost 19 feet long and I park it in a 10-foot driveway.
8-foot driveway.
8-foot driveway.
Well, I believe that specific project, it wouldn't be intended for cars to be parked in the actual driveway itself.
Yeah, but that's what happens. Okay?
That's what happens. I think
I
it's
mean,
messy.
I can go to 90% of the houses in the neighborhood and their car isn't parked in the garage. All their boxes of things are in the garage and the car's in the driveway. That's how all this discussion and this debate got started, because we had cars out hanging over sidewalks. Okay, so we want to have alley access?
And if you have a
Now I
20-foot
have the back
wide
end of my
building.
truck there, and I'm trying to, like I said, trying to figure out how Commissioner Waitman's garbage truck or the fire truck or the ambulance gets down the alley when I'm blocking it with the back of the truck.
If you have a 20-foot wide building, how big's that garage gonna be? That's.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
I presume a 20-foot wide house would have a one-car driveway, or a one-car garage.
Right. So.
Or two, I mean, 20-foot garage is a two-car garage.
Yeah, that's a little crazy.
This is Clark Hobby again. If this will help, I mean, our client's happy to go to the 40-foot lot width minimum on it. The other setbacks, I mean, our client's actually built a ton of T&D product around the country, and they feel like they can make it work and build beautiful communities with the other setbacks. I mean, they know how to build it. They build them around the world.
Okay.
But again, we have no problem with moving the alley loaded to 40 feet wide too.
Okay. So the alt standard request, 1.7 parking spaces per multifamily unit. The tradition in here for the last couple of years has been 1.9.
Right.
This board just a month or two ago made a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners to change the code to 1.9 spaces per multifamily unit. That's the alternative standard request that you and your compatriot, oh, she left already, routinely ask for. Why 1.7 on this project? What makes this project different that we can justify even less parking than what we've been asking for all the other projects for the last couple of years that I've been here?
There's a couple of answers, but not the least of which is the area where the corporate center is envisioned as a much more urban form of development than what we see in our
So how does that make it less parking needed?
We may have parking garages. We may have more on-street parking than we typically have in the county. It could be a completely different form of development.
Are you saying that you don't get credit for parking on street or parking garages?
depending on where they are under the code, you do and do not. I mean, we're likely to have a larger area. Right now, I think there's a limitation on where the spots are versus where the use is right now in the LDC, and in more urban form, I don't think that
If
necessarily
I live in an
applies.
apartment, do you think I'm gonna wanna park my car at the apartment complex I live in? If I live in an apartment complex, do you think I'm gonna wanna park my car at the apartment complex I live in? Not a parking garage in a corporate center half a mile away.
I think it depends how proximate they are. I mean, some of these are gonna be very close to one another. Some of the condition applies to multifamily in the corporate center. We might have vertically mixed-use buildings. I mean, that's the answer. I mean, honestly, Heinz, again, we built a lot of this stuff around the country, around Florida. Most of the areas that they build these kind of products in have 1.5 units. I mean, 1.5 spots per unit. And so we're trying to create something so we didn't start building a sea of parking lots where we're trying to make an urban area. That's what we're trying to do.
Do you see where a lot of people that live there also work there?
When they're okay. Mr. Henry was just putting a bug in my ear and said that they've done ITE studies and it's significantly less even than the, I think they'll lead to 1.7 even for the kind of project we're talking about.
So that was kind of the base of my questions. Do you see where a lot of people that, with projects like this, where a lot of people work where they live, you know, so there's maybe less driving going on,
right,
where you need less spots?
Right, that's the idea. With a more urban form, you're not having intentionally as much suburban form planning or living. You're trying to get people living in a more urban environment where they can walk to the uses. That's the whole idea.
Well, if
I understand
which in theory would
How many
require-
acres is this?
It's gross, it's over 700.
So if I live on the far western edge and I live in one of those 30-foot wide, single-family.
Doesn't
rear-loaded
apply to
houses,
that. No, the parking, I believe the parking relief is only for the multifamily and corporate center areas.
Okay.
We're not trying to change things that are more suburban in form. It's only to help us have more of an urban form. Again, we can build more and more parking
I
lots.
understand the idea that one might live close to their work. I would tell you that I'm not expecting that you're building New York City over here and that I'm going to come out of my high-rise flat and I'm going to walk to my office 2 blocks away. All right, and not everybody that lives over there is going to work in whatever light industrial job you have. They're still going to get in their car and they're going to drive to Tampa and work in their office at Wells Fargo Bank or wherever they work down there in Tampa. Yeah, some of them may do it, but not all of them are going to do it. So there's a need for parking.
I don't disagree with you. I mean,
I'm just not saying that there's been a justification. It's been the norm of this board to approve 1.9. Today it's 1.7. I'll just be really honest with you. I feel like we're starting to really push the envelope, okay? We come in here, we do 40-foot wide lots, now we want 30-foot wide lots. We agree to 1.9 all day long, now we want 1.7. And then that brings me to the next one. Now we don't want any buffers between the commercial lots. And I'm trying to figure out the justification for that. We make it, everybody else does a buffer. What's so special about here that you don't need to do any internal landscape buffers?
Well, and I will talk about buffers, but as far as the parking is concerned, so there is ITE 6th edition parking generation manual. And we've done multiple alternative standards in Pasco County and other municipalities where it's 1.5, 1.6, because that's what ITE has, depending on, they have broken down into the different types of multifamily. So yes, 1.9, because that was a kind of a gimme as far as that parking rate. But the reality is studies, but I'm saying, but as far as studies go, there are studies out there, and again, this is a brand new edition of ITE parking edition that shows that multifamily, certain multifamily have less than the 1.7 parking generation rate. So that's where that comes from. It's not just, hey, us arbitrarily lowering it. The reality is ITE has documented what that parking requirement is.
Okay, well, I'm not gonna get into that because I came here last time. In fact, I actually still have it on the flash drive here, the ITE 5th generation manual, but I don't know, you know, it's not like they do thousands of studies. How many studies are those based on?
Yeah, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but there are multiple studies. This is the 6th edition, which there are additional studies that have been done.
Okay, well, I'm making the point that it's been our tradition over the last couple of years to give them 1.9. Today it's 1.7.
And I agree, Mr. Moody, and that's why I don't ask for it typically, but this is trying to create a more urban style development, and that takes me to... I'm not opposed to that. I'm saying you haven't provided any justification for this any more than any other MPUD that's coming in here. And I'm curious about the justification to get rid of the buffers, and I'll read to you because one of the problems is, and maybe the county attorney can help me, is you still have to demonstrate that your alternative standard meets or exceeds the intent of the code. So
That's an accurate statement.
That's an accurate statement? Yes. Okay. So I wanted to read what the intent and purpose, right in paragraph A of 905.2 that you're asking for an alt standard for. It says, it's the intent and purpose of this subsection to promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the current and future residents of the county by establishing minimum standards for the preservation, development, installation, and maintenance of native and Florida-friendly landscaping as defined in section 373-185 Florida statutes. Such landscape and buffers are intended to improve the aesthetic appearance of public, commercial, industrial, and residential areas by reducing the visual impact of large building masses, by softening the visual impact of paved surfaces and vehicular use areas, and by screening conflicting uses from one another, and otherwise helping to establish a harmonious relationship between the natural and the built environment. The only justification I saw from staff to support the alt standard was one of incompatible uses, but what about all these other things? What about the relationship between the natural and built environment and the impact of softening the impact of paved spaces, paved surfaces, I'm sorry. I'm not seeing any justification to those. Those are the intent and the purpose. All I'm seeing, I mean, from where I sit, it's a justification to just make paving and have no landscaping like we require of anybody else. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against this development. I think this land is going to be developed. I think it's in a natural development location. It's at the intersection of a state road and an interstate highway. We'd be fools not to think about that it wasn't going to get developed. I just want to make sure that we get it done in the right way. And that brings me to the next point.
Mr. Moody, Mr. Moody, can I have Mr. Surak answer? Because you're firing all of these off about all of them, and we're not getting a chance to even answer the question. I think he has a response.
Brian Surak with Clearview Land Design. The intent of the buffer alternate standard is more for a company to come in and buy a piece of land, and then he subdivides it into 3 separate, say it's a hospital, and they want the hospital on one parcel and 2 medical office buildings on adjacent parcels. So the goal of that alternate standard would be to eliminate the actual buffer between his parcels, not an overall parcel to another.
I understand that, but to what end? To what end?
I'm sorry?
To what end? Okay, so the hospital comes in and then they want to make a couple out parcels for medical offices, and you don't want to have a nice landscape strip to their parcel. To what end? To what purpose does that serve?
Well, they want to be able to expand the parking lot with all of the, standard landscaping.
So we want to have more parking.
Well,
that we don't want
they got something else I'd like to offer. Again, as Clark Hobby again, if we're trying to create an urban form of development in the corporate center area, okay, our code is predicated almost entirely on suburban form development. And so I won't be able to, if we do this, I will not be able to in the corporate center to build the kind of development that Heinz is trying to build in the corporate center that they're building for the Rays in St. Pete. You can't do it with that kind of landscaping, Mr. Moody, and you know that. You can't be done.
Well, I don't know that that's the case because we have industrial parks and we require, I think it's a 5-foot type E buffer.
I'm talking about in the corporate center. It's not where the industrial parks are going.
Okay, so that's fine. But you actually are getting to the whole point I want to get to. I'm in support of this development. I want to make sure we do it right. But what I don't feel like is I don't feel like that you have all your I's dotted and all your T's crossed. And so that brings me to the comp plan, and that's the guiding document here. And there's paragraph 6 for those who are going to be looking up to check me on this. Gateway Hub implementation. And the Gateway Hub implementation section says that this is all going to be zoned MPUD, which we're doing. And then it talks about that your MPUD will include the following: site design elements and guidelines, general building placement, orientation, and character. Well, I know where that's happening with single-family lots, but I don't know where that's happening with any corporate center or mixed-use development. I don't know what the character is. I don't know where your general building placement, and no one's asking you to submit an engineered plan, but it says establishment of appropriate intensities and densities for the specific subcategory. I think you've met that. Any public realm improvements, street types, building lot types, park and open space requirements, if any. You've asked for an alt standard to reduce park space, and you mentioned in the justification for the alt standard that you want to create some larger open areas, which is laudable. I think that's great, but it'd be helpful to know kind of roughly what you're thinking, where, maybe a picture that shows. What I got right now is a land use plan. Can we put the land use plan back up? I got a land use plan with some shaded areas and 4 streets going. 4 lines that represent streets. I don't know where any parks and open space are.
The conditions required that we work that out with staff at the time of site plan review.
Yeah, but the comp plan says you need to include it in the MPUD.
Yeah, and there are provisions in the MPUD that say how we're going to do that. That was, I mean, you can ask Amy and Terry.
How do we know what we're getting? It says you're going to identify infrastructure needs and an implementation plan for the provision of that infrastructure. I haven't even heard from utilities yet whether there's adequate capacity, whether any improvements are going to need to be made. And this one gets me to your alt standards. Urban landscape standards. Where are those?
You just said you didn't want it.
No,
you want us to have the same thing that's in the regular code for suburban form.
I'm not saying. I think what they mean by urban lands, you want an urban form of development, and I'm not opposed to that. I work in an office that's downtown. Okay, and so we have urban landscaping. If I look out the window of my office, what is it that I see? I see street trees there. I've got these grates in the sidewalk with these trees growing out of them. We've got the city of Newport Richey was nice enough to supply the downtown businesses with planters and plant material. You know, that's what I'm wondering, how we're going to do all of these things. That's up to you to propose the standards. Mr. Peppers, could you, the other PDF file that I gave you? I think what I'm getting at is this is an important piece. And again, I expect that it's going to be developed. I'm happy it's going to be developed in an urban form. I want this to be successful. I want it to be good. But I think you need to do a little bit more planning. And this is my expectation of what I would get with a plan. That shows me how we're going to do some landscaping, how we're going to buffer some uses. Next photo. Something like this. I'm sure, Brian, you've seen plans like this all the time. It's a little bit more. No, this isn't an engineered plan, and I'm not expecting that every building that gets built when you finally build them are going to look, but at least it gives me an idea, and it gives the public an idea of what it is we're going to get. Right now I got some shaded areas, and I don't really know what I'm going to get, and I'm asking for a lot of gimmies that are beyond what we've been giving and I'm not seeing any justification for those. And the one thing I want to make sure, and I'm not saying your client is doing such a thing, but, you know, it's been there's a lot of history in this county where we give them these gimmies, and then we go out and we have these economic development agreements, and we go out and we build or fund infrastructure, and I'm thinking of one Sun Lake Boulevard, and I'm asking myself today, where's the T. Rowe Price office? And we've had that time and time again. Where's that Amazon warehouse down on Sun Lake? And I'm not saying that your client isn't going to bring these jobs. They might. But let's see something a little bit more pardon the pun, concrete here as to what we're going to get. What I see, like I said, is a colored plan with 4 roads drawn on it. And I think that your client has the ability to come back here with a plan that can knock our socks off. And I think you're probably pretty close to it. I just don't think you don't have it today, that's all. I don't really have
Mr. Moody, I don't believe any of that's required by the code. It's not required by the comp plan. And
just read what the comp plan requirements.
I mean, we're heading down a road where we're just going to lose this project over this. That's where we're headed. And that's really, really unfortunate that we worked for 2.5 years with staff to try to do this. It's going to create one of the major employment bases of the entire county.
I'm not suggesting anybody deny your project.
But it's taken me 2.5 years to get here. Now you're asking me to go basically to create site plans for an 800-acre area. We don't do that with MPUDs. We don't do it. It's not ever been done.
Show me where you're going to put parks.
We don't do that at the time of MPUD review.
The public screams at us. And they make some very derogatory comments about us daily on this Facebook group. And I know they're out here watching this today. And I've seen the derogatory comments already about this development. In fact, they've made quite a few derogatory comments about your client. I'm not going to go there. I want to make sure we get it right. And that's all. I don't think you're far away. I don't think your vision is off base. I think your vision is what the comprehensive plan. I'm asking you to provide us with a little more detail as to you want to limit park space for multifamily with the statement, well, we intend to make some larger open spaces. Okay, well, show me how you intend to do that. I understand these plans are flexible and they're a little rubber and this isn't a final site. We're not asking you for a final site plan. I'm asking you to show us something a little bit more clarity, that's all. Maybe when you come back, maybe I'll be supportive of 30-foot. I appreciate your client's offer for the 40-foot wides, but maybe I'd be supportive of 30s if you can show me how it's all going to work.
Mr. Moody, we don't have the ability to do what you're talking about doing. It's not required by the code. It's not within, we changed the code specifically so Planning Commission does not review site plans. And that's what you're trying to do. No, that's what you're trying to do. The code was changed for this purpose. We're not going to go out and spend $500,000 to create a concept plan for this that the code doesn't require. I mean, nobody's been asked to do it. The code doesn't require it. Comp plan doesn't require it. So we're not going to do that. And I'm sorry, I'm completely mystified here.
Where are the urban landscape standards? Where's the phasing plan? Number 7 says you're going to provide a development phasing plan with the MPUD. Is that in your MPUD?
It says there are conditions that say that we're going to phase it as needed by development.
Well, where's the phasing plan? There's not a plan to phase it. It says you might phase it. The comp plan says you're going to provide a plan. You guys are smart guys. You can come back here next week and provide me a plan. I'm sure Mr. Shurak over here is quite capable of doing that.
The same statement.
Same thing with the urban landscape standards. We don't want to have buffers. Okay, fine. Show me how you're going to landscape around these buildings to do something that meets or exceeds the intent and purpose of the code. That's your burden to get an alternative standard. I just don't feel like you've met the burden yet. Not to say you can't, and I think your team is quite capable of doing it.
So staff supported the alternative standards. That creates a presumption that it was met legally. You have a different opinion, that's your opinion. So now you have to prove to us legally how it's not being met. That's legally how it works. I mean, I just, as I said, mystified that we may lose a project of this importance over these issues. I mean.
Well, you know, I think it's fair to say that, you know, the developer's asking us for exceptions and just take it on faith. And I, for one, am not willing to do that. I'm tired of getting in my ear all the time because we go along with the development plan thinking that they're going to do something. I can give you a perfect example of what got approved on Little Road, that Lennar project. Looks like a piece of crap. Nobody that drives by that thinks that we did the right thing there, and I agree with them. And I'm getting tired of standing up here, taking the bows and arrows, and just approving whatever comes along because it's inconvenient. We have a product, Pasco County has a product that's worth something.
I agree.
And we have to demand that these developers, if they want to do development here, if they want to come here and make money and leave the county with all that money, more power to them. But my God, we got to get something for it. I'm tired of driving by places that look like crap because we took it on faith. And I agree with John. It requires development. When I drive through Miami Beach, I see a lot of corporate development and I see a lot of landscaping.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a recommendation here? I think there are 2 or 3 of these alternative standards that Mr. Moody is focusing on. Is that correct? I mean, that's primarily what you're worried about. The parking, the parks, and I think there was one more, right?
Well, first of all, I live in Longleaf, and I concur with what he says. You got some people with 15-foot driveways. Nobody can get by there. If you try to pull your car in, you can't get it in. You know, and that's not right. And that problem is there from that day forward.
On the alley loaded, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, I'll talk with Mr. Shurak in a minute, but can we focus, because you started reeling off stuff about the various alternative standards, right? So if it is the Planning Commission's recommendation that we not have the 1.7, I think what you're suggesting is that we go to 1.9 on that issue, correct?
I haven't suggested anything, but I'd be more inclined to support 1.9 like we do in every other MPUD than 1.7 today. And I'd be more inclined to support 40-foot or 45-foot wide lots rather than 30-foot wide lots like we do in every other MPUD. But I still don't feel like that you've provided enough detail or met those implementation requirements of the Gateway Hub section of the comprehensive plan. In fact, you know, with the whole thing on the buffers, there's a section on compatibility. It even requires buffers.
But Mr. Moody, we did require special buffers for our neighbors and for the external.
So come back and show us what you're going to do. That's all I'm asking. Show us what you're going to do so that we know what it is we're going to get. I understand you can't tell me who's in this building, that building, and I understand that building may change shapes 47 times before it's sold 10 years from now. I understand that this isn't all getting built next week. I'm sorry I keep pointing to this. This is not the developer's proposal, but something like that. I understand that. I understand this is a long-term project.
We should be able to determine whether there is going to be a streetscape. I can look down Grand Boulevard and Main Street and see that there is a streetscape, and I know what it is. It doesn't have anything to do with the buildings. It's what the neighborhood looks like.
Again, Mr. Chairman, The streetscape issues are addressed in there, and we're not seeking relief in the regular single-family detached area. I think there's a lot of
Yeah, but you're
confusion.
not addressing, it says you're gonna provide, in the implementation sections, you're gonna provide urban landscape standards. Okay, so there's a whole section in your conditions of approval that talk about you're gonna have 2 trees per lot and so on and so forth, but doesn't tell me what you're gonna do over in front of the hotel or the corporate center or along I-75 or along the Orange Belt Trail.
It does say along the Orange Belt Trail.
Have you ever seen a form-based code?
Yes.
Well, back to your question, so can you, certainly your plan's gonna have landscaping and it
Right.
says there's a code involved, so can you maybe highlight that or talk about that?
Well, we said on the external boundaries of the MPUD, we would follow the land development codes. That's first and foremost. We only have one group of neighbors, and we've agreed to add additional. We stepped up the buffering next to them. All the standard about is what the alternative standards might be in the corporate center area. I believe it's just corporate
Can we
center.
put his plan back up? This, I meant to use this as a talking example, but I'll ask you a couple questions about that, Clark.
Okay.
We had a case in here, when was the last time we were over here in Dade City? Where we had a big discussion about a concrete block wall versus a fence along Willow Bend Parkway. All right? And we talked about a type D2 or D3 buffer or whatever. So are you saying that we're not gonna have any buffers of the single family against any of these rights of way? Are there gonna be buffers between theoretically incompatible uses of multifamily and single family? He's saying he'll have the big perimeter buffers on the outskirts of here. What are we doing on the inside?
Yeah, like an area like River Crossing.
Mr. Chairman, I have a little bit of input from the client. One thing we think we could do is we could remove the alternative standard on these issues altogether and not ask you to approve them and it's on parking and the internal buffering. We feel like it's causing a lot of confusion here that we didn't mean to cause with the overall project, and we don't mind doing that.
Does that include the landscape?
That would be the internal. First of all, we're doing more landscaping than the code requires in one area. We don't want to affect that. It was only the internal. I think we asked for relief on the internal landscaping, so we would just withdraw that
Clark,
for purposes of the
just to clarify,
MPUD.
maybe we could put up the slide that has all the alternative standard requests.
Right.
If you could just go through which ones you're
Right.
withdrawing and which ones you're still pursuing.
Right. Not the first one and not the second one.
Okay, so the first one you're still pursuing.
Right.
Okay.
Second one we're pursuing. Third one we're pursuing. It would be the fourth one, amount of land required, and the fifth one as it relates to the internal buffering. Right? I'm getting that right. No, it's actually just the last, was it last three? Yeah, and I'm sorry, the last one. It'd be the last three.
I appreciate that, but I think you're not, in some ways, I think you're misunderstanding the argument that I make. I don't want to make it sound like that
Wasn't one conversation.
I just want to get on the record which alternative standard, you let you make comments, but I want to get on the record which alternative standard request the applicant is voluntarily withdrawing. Okay, so is it the last?
It would be the last three on the list.
So it's the neighborhood park acreage, the deviation from landscaping and buffering, and
Right.
parking.
Right. We
You're
still
just gonna-
want to do more on the landscape buffering on the one area, but yes, the relief.
Yes, but I don't
Really,
want
So, I just want to get this clear. So you're not seeking any alternative standard, you would just comply with the code on those three issues?
Right.
Unless it's site plan, you can convince staff.
That's right.
Okay. Now, we've at least got that clarified now, go ahead and make that.
Okay. Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead, okay.
I don't want to say that I couldn't be in support, say for it, by way of example, reducing the park area for multifamily, if you can show me how you're going to do something that meets or exceeds the intent of the code. I mean, if you want to come in here and show me on the plan, well, I'm planning to have a big park area here in the middle of the multifamily that'll address these 10 apartment complexes I'm proposing on this 100 acres, I might very well support your alternative.
And I understand your point, Mr. Moody, and that's why I'm withdrawing it, because at this point, I can't give you the detail that you need at this high level on the MPUD. And so the
Yeah, I
only
think it's
way.
the same thing with the landscape buffer too, because it makes sense to not have a landscape buffer between, say, a hospital.
But you may need to
park.
see more detail on it. And again,
Right.
that's the pickle I'm in, because we're at a very high level on a very large project with the MPUD. If they get into building the corporate center in a very urban area and they can convince staff that they have a different landscaping package, to your point, they should have the chance to figure that out with staff. If they can convince staff that urban design is better and they have the details. The only point, it's in a tough part at the MPUD level. We don't have the kind of plans that you want.
My personal
So that's why
preference is it gets worked out here where the public gets a chance to participate in this.
But
not behind closed doors at the staff level.
Well, that's why the planning commission's role is limited and is not including site plan reviews at this time. And so, I think we've got to be careful. That was the whole point why the code was changed 10, 12 years ago.
Well, to that point, have we taken public comment yet?
Yes, we did.
We did.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, again.
I don't disagree with Mr. Moody's point, but typically when that's the case, when we want the public to have input, it's usually when the public shows up and they have a comment about the landscaping or the parking or something, but apparently none of them have.
I understand his point, which is you shouldn't be asking for the relief. He wants to see more detail to substantiate the relief. And I'm confident that if we get into building a very urban style development, that we could convince staff later, if we even do this, that it would be merited. But maybe if the planning commission's not comfortable in granting the relief now, I think it's better that we just withdraw the request for it, and we'll have to comply with the code. That's as simple as that, unless, we can.
I know you're just trying to move the project forward.
Right,
So
right.
whatever it takes to move it forward.
That's right.
And you're okay with the
we are
40
trying to move it forward, but not at the expense of our lifestyle, and that's what we've been doing to a large extent.
Well, Mr. Gray, I don't want to do that, and I understand, and that's why I'm with
you grew up here,
Well,
I don't want to, I just don't want to see it continue on, that Lenartha deal was the last straw for me. I mean,
I understand, Mr. Gray. One thing I would just point out for your benefit, and I'm really just is more of a personal thing, the joint ventures that are developing this include the Cruzen family, and they're staying in the deal. And there's a family member here that's been hired by Heinz that works on this project. And they've owned this land, I think, for 100 years, and they're going to continue developing it for a very long period of time. So they're, in this case, it's not being flipped off to National Home Builder XYZ. That's not what's going on here.
So to summarize, what I'm hearing the applicant say is on those three issues, they will, as it stands today, they're saying they're going to comply with the code, unless they can demonstrate to staff later that they meet the intent of the code. It's the same standard later
We would have any.
when they seek an alt standard as it is
Right.
today. So
and
now, if you all
40
don't like
lots
the
as well.
code itself, that's a
40
different issue that we probably need to be telling staff, we don't like the way the code is today on landscaping or parking. And you all had that discussion on parking last time.
Yeah.
So, but as it stands today, they're saying that they're going to comply with the code on those three issues.
Right.
Well,
So I want
40
to
foot lots.
clarify that you'll have an opportunity though.
Right.
Because again, if you can reduce some of the buffering in between and enhance landscaping elsewhere, I would love to see that. I mean, and the same with parking. I just want to make sure you have some flexibility down the road if you're.
Yes, sir.
They have the same standard we just talked about.
Right.
They can make their case to staff at site plan approval to do those deviations.
Okay.
I think, in thinking about this, and I understand where Mr. Moody's coming from, and I know some of these have been hot button issues very recently, and this has been pending. Some of these conditions have been in there for like a year now. So some of these, you know, the temperature of all of our boards is changing, but I do appreciate the fact that it's impossible at my level to provide maybe the kind of certainty that the county globally would want to see to grant the relief. And that's why I think withdrawing those three makes sense, but still allowing the project to proceed.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, I mean, I think this board of volunteers, I might add,
right,
you know, are just, I'm not going to allow them to keep taking it in a year for somebody to come in from, you know, rubber ball Africa and decide they want to develop property and then beat feet and go somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know, that's, to me, we don't owe those people anything. They owe this county an opportunity to get the best we can have.
Sure. Because
we've gone the other way. We've been taking it on faith for too long, and we need to start asking for more.
Okay.
And
that's understood, Mr. Chairman.
And I think it's fair to withdraw those requests. I feel a lot better approving it on that basis. And you know, I have a lot of respect for you. You're a good attorney. You're a good land-use attorney, and I know you have the interests of Pasco County for many years, and your father too. So,
can I just make one more comment about the comp plan consistency?
Yeah.
Which is, the comp plan continues to apply even at site plan approval. I think I don't want you all to think that just because they didn't deal with something specifically in the MPUD. Now, if the comp plan says it has to be dealt with in the MPUD, that's a different issue. But generally, staff should be reviewing site plans for consistency with the comp plan too. I mean, the comp plan continues to apply. So if staff is not doing that, that's a problem. But I don't want you all to think that just because staff didn't dot an I or cross a T from the comp plan in the MPUD that somehow they've waived the comp plan. I don't think that's accurate. It still applies. Their site plans have to be consistent with it. So, and I think staff should be ensuring that happens.
We don't disagree there.
okay. Any other questions? We've had public comment. We've had the presentation. Any other questions from the dais?
And just to clarify, so we talked about the 40-foot wide on the rear loaded. You guys are okay with going
yes,
as well?
Yeah, well,
so in addition to removing those three?
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, did we decide about the setback?
I don't
want to have his car hanging out on it.
I don't think, I mean, I'll ask Mr. Shurak, do we need to address that? Are you comfortable with the setback, the rear setbacks? I mean, they believe they will work, so, I mean, I'll say this, I will meet with Mr. Moody after the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
If we're missing something and they're too small, we'll adjust them.
Guys, this isn't rocket science. We all know how long a pickup truck is, okay? And we all know
feet.
that it's longer than 8 feet or whatever the setback is to the garage here, so.
Well, I mean, my only response to that, and I completely understand clearly my 18-foot or 17-foot truck's not gonna fit an 8-foot driveway, but I'm also not gonna park my 18 or 17-foot truck in an 8-foot driveway. So I mean,
We're not gonna buy one.
You have common sense.
Well,
There's lots of people
I
out there
agree.
that don't.
I mean, we're trying to put common sense in the equation, and that's difficult, dangerous.
Are you sure about that?
But yes, we're fine on 40, Mr. Ponlitz.
Okay. Okay. So, without further ado, do we have a motion? Or do we just have emotion?
I'll make a motion to approve with the removal of those 3 variance items that were mentioned and the removal of the 30-foot rear load product in the residential.
I'll second. So the motion is, to clarify, it's converting the 30-foot lots to 40.
40 is correct, that's right.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion of the motion? If not, I'll signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Denise.
The following item will be presented by Orlando Boris.
Orlando. We've been waiting for you, Orlando.
Feeling lucky? Well, it's been quite a long meeting so far, right? So, anyways, as you know, I'm Orlando Borras with Planning and Economic Growth. I'll be presenting PEG 247639, Timber Ridge MPUD. This is a zoning amendment from R3 medium density residential district to an MPUD, allowing 190 single family detached units on approximately 48 acres. And it's currently located west of US Highway 301, specifically west of 14th Street. This is the site location, as you can see, it's on the North Market area. This is the location of the area, of the subject property, I should say. This is going to be the context map, and as you can see right over here, if the clicker helps me out, well, on the west side of the property, you're going to see Power Line Road Trail, and on the east side, you're going to see the Northern Seaboard Trail. Northern Seaboard Trail is part of Huitlacuche Trail, and the applicant will be either building their segment or paying the county for the cost for this trail over here. As you can see, this is going to be the zoning district. It's going to be R3, already discussed. And the subject property is going to be Res 6. The applicant is requesting the following variation from the Land Development Code. LDC 906.1.d.11, street access to adjoining property. So it's going to be proposing an emergency access to Catalina Drive, which PEG is in full support, given that it's going to be avoiding the impacts on the road of the subdivision to the north, which are currently not up to county standards. And this is coming recommended by PEG with conditions of the Board of County Commissioners. If you have any questions, more than happy to answer them.
Any questions for the moment?
No.
Okay. The applicant? You look like the last one.
Mr. Chairman, Clark Hobby again. So the project, if we go back to the master plan, thank you. The subject property is on 14th Street on the north side of Dade City. It's in the area that's north of Locke Street, where the Tommytown subdivision and redevelopment area was built, and that the county has spent a lot of money resurfacing the streets in that area. This is pretty close to that, just east of it. And the property is characterized by an area that most of my life has needed big reinvestment. The streets have been substandard for a long time. There's a mishmash of uses as you come up 14th Street. There's some older legacy kind of light industrial uses, and there have been a number of houses that have been neglected for a number of years. Not to say that everybody's house in that area is, that's not to say that at all. But from a planning perspective, it's got Res 6 future land use for the area that we're dealing with. It's not in Northeast Pasco, never has been. The site immediately south of this site is the county's Pasco County Housing Authority project that's called Hilltop Landings. And it's on 12.8 acres and I believe has 69 units. So it's built out at a density of 5.4 units per acre. The project called Elba Heights, which was built, I believe, in the early 60s by the Medill family, has a 3.8 unit per acre density, which is roughly in line with what this project is. So we feel like the project is in keeping with the density of the area. The area needs reinvestment, and it took a lot of pushing to try to get our client up in this area. And so we're excited about that. Now, with regard to the alternative standard we're providing several interconnects here, and staff and obviously the board have been pushing for that. But the Elba Heights subdivision directly north of our site, the roads are in really poor shape, and so we think it's appropriate only to have emergency access there so that we're not putting even a greater burden on those streets. The other access, and I think you're probably going to hear from a folk or two from the community, the access on the western end is to, I think it's a lot that has one house on it. It does not provide access from this project to Powerline Road. That's not our intention. But as you all know, the board is encouraging staff to require interconnects everywhere humanly possible. And so we're generally trying to accommodate them, but we are not accessing Powerline Road and don't believe we'll have any effect on the northeast Pasco area.
Is that an emergency access?
I believe that's a full access. The emergency access is only the one on the northern end. So what will happen, Mr. Gray, is it will be stubbed out, but the stub will be on our property and it may never lead to anything.
Are you required to put that stub there if there's no proposal to develop the land to the west? So you go in for your preliminary development plan and there's no proposal from the owner to the west, do you still have to put a
We
stub?
still, if you follow these conditions, we believe that we're going to be mandated to do that. Now, that I know, Mr. Moody, we've talked about this over many years and the various interconnection provisions of the code, and I'm not sure we're getting these all right. I mean, unless somebody develops next to you, I don't know why you'd have to actually build a constructed stub to it. 15 years ago or so, what staff would say is if you just left the land alone so that there could be a connection, that would have sufficed. Generally, that's not what we hear from staff now, so I think we're assuming we're going to have to build a stub, which is kind of silly. And there are fairly significant topo issues here as well. So just two other things I was going to note. This project's been in for a long time too, and it's not subject to PM 26, but for the 5-foot side yard setback, we're going to meet all of PM 26, all the landscaping, green space, all the other requirements, streetscape changes and all that. So that's good. We are either going to contribute the cost of or construct the trail along the frontage of the site, which is a 10-foot regional trail that the county's trying to build up here. And so hopefully that'll end up being an amenity. And then just one last thing in the spirit of disclosure. So we are working, this is going to be, the site's very likely going to be served by Dade City. Dade City's going through some wastewater capacity challenges, and we have to get that worked out, and there's a working group that's trying to get that worked out with Dade City right now. But obviously we can't develop this type of development without the utilities being in place. So we added a condition simply saying that prior to PDP, PSP approval, we have to have a utility service agreement from Dade City, which I think is the rational way of doing that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and obviously we're going to have a couple of comments from the community.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Mr. Chair, the first person that signed up to speak on this item is Nancy Hazelwood, and followed by John Greats and Larry Raw. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce her last name correctly.
Okay. Hazelwood. John and Larry, if you want to come sit up close so you can get up.
Nancy Hazelwood, 34119, nice place. I'm speaking for some others that can't attend either, Richard Riley and a lady named Mary Strait. So I wanted to point out some policies for future land use recognition of Northeast rural. Pasco County shall recognize through land use policies and land development regulations the Northeast rural area as an area with specific rural character. It shall be the policy of the county that rural area requires approaches to land use intensities, rural roadway corridor protection, the provision of service facilities, environmental protections, and so on. And that's from the comp plan. Also, you can check 604.4 in Land Development Code Scenic Roadway Corridor Preservation and Enhancement. And this section tells you that Frazee Hill and Blanton Roads are scenic roadways. And then you have policy 2.1.1, recognition of Northeast rural area. Pasco should recognize land use policies, blah, blah, blah. And it's the same, and it goes on about protecting the area, but this project, and I know it fits in, but I could still use less densities there, and it's not abutting, but you're putting probably close to 500 vehicles on Blanton and Frazee Hill Road from here with this stub out on Overpass Road. Overpass? No. What's the name of the road?
Power line?
Thank y'all. Power line, you passed that one.
Well, it won't connect to power line.
Yeah, it'll never connect.
Hmm?
It won't connect to power line, there's a property in between.
It's
a stub out for
It's a
potential.
stub out, but if
that gets
anybody
developed.
decides to buy it or anything else, it'll get there.
Her point is
So,
that if it is developed, then that gets them to power line.
yeah, and power line adjoins Northeast Rural. And therefore, we've got Frazee Hill Road and Blanton Road that could be already getting overused with the stuff down by the college. Blanton Road is already substandard road, but mostly we are concerned these roads will no longer sustain and support the rural area if they incur high volumes of traffic. Already that Blanton Road has become dangerous, especially to our cyclists. We've always said that our densities and intensities of whether it's homes or vehicles needs to be on 301 and not here. So keeping it off the Northeast rural roads is the only way, is one of the ways that we need to keep the Northeast rural area sustainable. We can't sustain it if we put mobs of traffic on it. Anyways, thank you all. I hope you will take this into consideration from now and into the future of anything that's going near there. Please don't put that traffic on the Northeast rural roads. And maybe there's some way that you could put fewer people in this project and it would help also keeping people off the roadways. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, Ms. Hazelwood, that, you know, that might be something to deal with at that point. So if that other property does get developed, and then we can look at that. If they're considering connecting, that would be the time to kind of broach that subject.
We don't want you to speak from there. Excuse me. Did you want her to come back up?
If she wants to make a comment.
I thought about that, but I figure it ought to be done now so it's not an issue then and maybe a harder issue to run into. More difficult. Thank you.
Okay. Was it Larry or John that was next?
It's John.
John Grace, 16008 14th Street. We don't want your dam development. You keep your dam houses up North Road where they
Excuse me.
belong, buddy.
Just a minute. Don't use any profanity. We don't want to do
I
that.
have a right to free speech. Thank you very much.
Speech, you have a right to free speech, but not profanity. There's no reason for that. Okay?
I don't comply with you.
Excuse me?
All right, listen. We got enough dam traffic up and down 14th Street.
I just asked you not to use profanity. Just speak in
If you'll
normal
just speak
language.
to us calmly, we're happy to listen.
Come on, nobody's yelling at you.
All right, we have enough traffic up and down 14th Street there, sir. When there's a bad accident out on 301, all the traffic comes on 14th Street. Can't get in and out of our driveways.
Okay.
When I pull out of my driveway, I go to the left, I see cows. I want to keep it
Hold on
that
one
way.
second. Could you put the map back up so we can see exactly where he lives and all that? It's Larry?
John.
John, okay. I'll get you right in a minute here.
I'm right across the street from Alba Heights. There's Fiesta Drive. My house is right across the street from Fiesta Drive.
Okay, you got a pointer? Somebody got a pointer?
Over here? Or you're across 14th?
From Fiesta, go up to the north.
I'm right on 14. So that was the first. All right, so there's Fiesta Drive. My house is literally right across the street from Fiesta Drive, right on 14.
Okay. So now you're having trouble getting out which way?
Either way I go, if there's a bad accident on 301, they shut it down, all the traffic comes on the 14th Street. So if you develop this property, it's only going to get worse.
So how's the traffic if normally without an accident shutting it down?
It's still bad.
Traffic's still bad, unfortunately.
Traffic's still bad.
What's the
And
condition?
then my other concern is, because if you, I don't know if you guys have been down 14th Street, but all the houses on the, where's that pointer at? All the houses over here are on an incline, and it floods really bad. So if you develop this, where's all the water going to go? All the water's going to go right back into our properties where it's already going.
Okay.
So I'm opposed to that. I want to keep it a hayfield like it is, because that's what it's being used for now, is a hayfield. Let's keep our country country. Let's keep the Yankees the hell up out of Florida. That's all I have to say. We got enough damn Yankees down here. And I just say that because I'm 6th generation Floridian.
So am I.
As am I.
So I have to apologize to everybody for that outburst. I don't think it was necessary, and I tried to warn him. And, you know, I think, you know, we want to listen to everybody's concerns. I think that's only fair. But there's always two sides to every story. So I think we have Larry, right?
Yes, sir. Larry Brow, I'm at 16421 Spring Valley Road.
Okay, can you put that map back up there again? Because looking at that Pasco County logo doesn't do me any good.
So I originally had no intention of speaking today. When I got here, I knew about this. I've not studied the project. I don't know what the big impact is, what it's going to be to me, but I do know that the Frazee Road and Blanton Road are going to be impacted. So the one thing I want to say is I spent 27 years in the Army. I traveled all over the world waiting for that day that I could retire and find that perfect place where I could have peace, where I could have that tranquility. I tried in Lutz, and when I got to Lutz, it was fine. They said Lutz never changes. If you've been to Lutz lately, you know that that's not true. And they never supported the infrastructure. They just kept building and building and building. And so we fled. I thought Dade City was going to be the dream, my final resting place, my home, where I could, you know, give it to my kids. And
You're not that old. So.
I'm a little older than you think. Grandkids. And so I guess my concern is that, you know, the thing that I would ask you is that, you know, you think about the, you know, those that do the living, breathing, and dying in the communities, you know, that are impacted by, you know, these projects. First it was, you know, the solar area, that really affected us. But honestly, solar panels don't, you know, they don't commit crimes, they don't drive cars, and they don't bother the roadways. So I could get past that. All the construction down by the college, now that's a different story. That's going to impact us tremendously. So now we're going to have it coming from the bottom of the hill and then over Frazee Hill. And then I guess I'm just asking what's next. Because I know there's money to be made in this community. And I know that there's gentlemen out here that want to make that money. I'm just asking that, I guess my time's up, but I guess I'm just asking that you consider, you know, the longer range impacts, that once you do this, you can't go back. Lutz can never go back to what it was. And I don't want to get in my car and pack up my home and go to Webster's or either further north. I kind of like it here. Dade City is a beautiful, beautiful. It is the ultimate place to live. So thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Who's next? Is there anybody on the list?
That was the last person that was signed up, but if you'd like to call for any other public comment.
Okay, is there any other public comment?
And for the record, we have no one signed up to speak on WebEx.
Okay. Yes, sir. We need your name and address, and have you been sworn?
Brian, no, sir.
Raise your right hand.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
Brian Dippel, D-I-P-P-E-L, 36407 Fraser Hill Road.
Okay.
I'd go by that huge, they're trying to develop that huge development there off of the interstate. I go by that a lot. And I'm wondering what's going to happen to all the animals that live in there. And because I also see a bald eagle every now and then flying around there. And so that's my concern. I think we have enough development. Overpass Road has that huge warehouse that's still sitting empty, not being used. I go by that all the time also. So what do we need another big development there for? I moved from Tampa to Dade City to live rural. And I like to keep it that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Yeah, I guess there's no other questions, so. Yeah. Mr. Hobby will come up and try to give you some of his perspective.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have Mike Razor speak to the traffic issues in just a minute, but I thought it would help the Planning Commission to understand a little bit more about the area and the densities involved here. Again, the area in which we find ourselves has never been part of the Northeast Pasco rural area. It's in close proximity to it, but it has never been in it. And for that reason, the county built the project that's directly south of us after the adoption of Northeast Pasco, okay? That was built to replace the Dade Oaks project in Dade City, and it's townhouses and apartments at, I think, 40% denser than what we're seeking. So we're transitioning down, and it's also...
So Clark, just to clarify, wasn't that the Pasco County Housing Authority that did build that?
Yes, Pasco County Housing Authority.
I thought you said the county.
Well,
That's
Pasco County Housing, I understand it's a different body politic.
I don't want...
Right, the county itself did not build, the housing authority did.
Okay.
I understand. It's also important to know that the existing zoning on this site is R3. Now, R3 does have larger lot standards than the 40s and 50s than this would allow, but it also is clear in the zoning code that it allows up to a much higher density than what we're seeking here. We are seeking 101 units less than the comp plan allows. So this is not about just creating a bonanza, getting the highest density. We're trying to transition from the townhouse apartment units down to the density, the same density as the Elba Heights project that's directly north of the site. I failed to mention before, and if there are any questions for Mike on that issue, he can answer it as well. But we are, 14th Street there's a section of it that's substandard, and we're repaving it at our cost as well as the trail.
I was about to ask about that.
So that's going to help. As to the gentleman's question about drainage, you all are well aware after all these many hearings that we certainly can exacerbate any flooding issues. The rate and the amount of discharge from our site and the pre-development condition can't be exceeded in the post. So there was one question also, I think, about the level of service and impacts on Fraser Hill Road and Blanton Road. And before I turn it over to Mike, I just would point out that Blanton Road, I think, is probably 2 miles, 2.5 miles from this site. So it's generally, that's considered a long way away for traffic purposes. And Frazee Hill Road, I believe from our site is about a half mile away, but I wanted Mike to specifically address the level of service of 14th Street, which is what the county's supposed to be concerning himself.
Clark, you mentioned the single-family density to the north. Do you have an idea what that is? You said it was...
It's our proposal's 3.9 units per acre, theirs is 3.8.
Okay.
Mike?
And it looks like there's another little subdevelopment to the south, too. Looks similar on the map. But
That's the county one.
yeah,
I mean,
that's the county one.
not the county one, the
Okay.
housing authority one, yes.
Okay. I thought that was a little further to the south.
All right. Good afternoon. For the record, Michael Razor with Razor Transportation Consulting, and I have been sworn. My firm prepared the timing and phasing analysis for this project. So in regard to 14th Street and level of service, the level of service with and without the project is both at level service C. Volume to capacity ratios, which are a measure of how much traffic is on the road compared to how much capacity a certain road has. North of the project site in the morning, about 10 to 15%. In the afternoon, north of the project site, between 20 and 22%. South of the project on 14th Street, without the project, about 15% in the morning, 25% with the project in the morning. In the afternoon, south of the project site, about 20% in the afternoon without the project, and about 35% with the project. So in the worst case, 35% of the capacity would be consumed with the development of this project, leaving 65% available, which the level service C finding is just a matter of the way that FDOT's tables work out for this, where level service C is the best level of service that could occur on this particular road, where if we were looking at a different category of road, these volume to capacity ratios are more in the line with level service A and B. So with that, 14th Street, with the project developed, would meet and exceed the county's performance standards that would be applicable. In regard to traffic on Frazee Hill and to the north of the project in general, the distribution of project traffic that we used in our traffic study was obtained from traffic counts done at the other the subdivisions. And we identified 15% to and from the north, which works out to a worst case of 27 vehicles during the peak hour, which is approximately 1 every 2 minutes, or 1 every 4 minutes in each direction. So with that, we also, as Clark had just mentioned, there is a substandard road improvement that is going to improve a segment of 14th Street from where it ceases being standard up to the project site driveway. And with that, of course, I'm here for any questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, not specific to this project, but do you know why we don't include the timing and phasing analysis with MPUDs? Because for the Euclidean rezonings, Liam and Denise always attach a summary, either attach the timing and phasing analysis or a summary of the timing and phasing analysis, so that the planning commission and public kind of know everything that you just said before the hearing. I'm trying to figure out why we're not doing that on MPD. I mean, this gentleman got up and yelled at us.
Right.
But he had no way of knowing what the level of service was, because
right.
Nobody's putting the timing and phasing analysis in the agenda package.
I have what I believe is happening is when Acela split the applications up into completely separate, they're linked as related applications, but they're completely separate. A lot of that stuff isn't necessarily getting dragged over, but I do agree with you, David. It would be instructive for that to be in the agenda package. I would think if I were a neighbor and I saw that it was still operating at level of service C, which is considered generally around the county very good, I would have been less concerned about the traffic.
So, Mr. Pitos and Mr. Engel, how do we make sure that happens on a going forward basis? That the timing and phasing analysis starts to get attached for MPUDs?
It can be added.
Yeah. So I'll start seeing that now in Civic Clerk. You're going to start attaching those?
Yeah, we'll start attaching them.
Okay.
Awesome. Clark, Mike, can you go back to the emergency access connection on the property to the north? What was the the thinking there. The
That-
rationale for making an emergency only versus a full.
And I mean, the thought generally was, I was trying to put myself in the position of thinking about what those neighbors would feel like, because I'm assuming that if their streets ever get resurfaced, and maybe I know the county's been changing the process, that they would be likely getting a PVAS assessment. And we didn't want to, I'm very familiar with the site. It was my grandfather's best friend built that community. I've been out there a lot my whole life, and the streets are very much substandard. And I just thought that they wouldn't want any of our people cutting through there. It was as simple as that.
So you bring up a point. And this brings me to the connections on the west. And I've said this before, and maybe I'm not sure that I understand what the commissioners want as far as interconnection of developments. When I imagine interconnection of developments, and I'm sorry because I'm a West Sider, so I'm going to use some West Side examples. I imagine River Crossing Boulevard connected to Starkey, connected to Decubilis, and it connects all of those developments. I don't envision creating a cut-through into someone else's neighborhood. Chuck, I'm trying to, maybe you can help me with this. If you take Fox Hollow, there's a little cut through just before you get to the school where you can cut through up into Jasmine Lakes, and then that street becomes a cut through street. Mm-hmm. I don't think we want to connect neighborhoods by making people's quiet residential streets cut through streets. And I think what's going on, and I understand the staff is hearing the commissioner saying we need interconnectivity. Yeah, and I think that's great. On the boulevard streets, you know, the main thoroughfares through these things, where the houses back up to the street and are protected by a wall, that makes sense. But to make somebody's quiet residential street an interconnect for the sake of interconnection is really destroying their neighborhoods and their peaceful enjoyment of their property. I think we got to be really careful about how we implement street continuation policies. Yes, creating a network of, like I said, the bigger boulevard streets, sure. But I don't want to make everybody's quiet residential street a cut-through street. And so to Ms. Hazelwood's point, I'm not sure that we ought to have a connection out to the west. If the property to the west were something that was 500 acres and was going to support 1,000 homes, and they were planning vision roads, and we want to make sure we connect this vision road and this subdivision to that vision road and that subdivision, but just to create a stub out so that we can make that'll happen inside this development. They build the other development, connect to this proposed stub out, and there's going to be somebody's lot that's affected by cut-through traffic, right, trying to get to 14th to 301. I just think we need to really rethink. Staff, maybe you need to have more discussions with the commission about how we really want to implement, you know, our street continuation policies. I don't think we want to use people's residential streets to create that. So
there are times when those local street connections actually help both communities. And I'll give you an example. We live in Longleaf. There's people that go from Fairbury Springs through Longleaf to get to the signalized intersection of Starkey and 54. So because they don't have their own signalized intersection out to 54. So there are times, and yes, they're using the local streets. And Longleaf connects to Fairbury Springs, and Fairbury Springs connects to Longleaf. So sometimes it's needed to get safe access to, because one neighborhood may have a great access to a signal, the other doesn't.
Yeah, but how would you feel if you're the lot that all those cars are going by? You didn't buy it.
I am. I live on I am on one of those lots that people from Fairbury Springs go through.
I said this during the last planning commission.
But I'd much rather have that than people getting killed on State Road 54. I'm being honest with you. As long as I got speed control in Longleaf. Okay, we got all kinds of speed tables. They're not flying through Longleaf. Okay, so, but do I think it's better for those people to be going out to Starkey and getting to the signal at Starkey and 54 to get on the 54 than trying to cross where they are out on Fairway Springs and probably getting hit on 54?
maybe.
Absolutely. No, I'm not saying that's the case in every single interconnect, okay? But there are times when those interconnects facilitate safe traffic movement to the collectors and arterials because one neighborhood has a signal and the other doesn't.
That may be, and I warned of a situation that's coming. I can tell you right now, there's a whole bunch of development happening on Colony Road, and the only way they can't make a left onto 52 when they get down there. So they're gonna end up cutting through Shadow Ridge at the expense of someone else's quiet little residential street. And that's what happens when we don't plan the major streets. I got no problem with connecting up the Vision roads and the major, but I'm not sure that we necessarily need some local residential street connection to every little neighborhood. And then especially if in this case, that may at some point impact the northeast rural area. I don't know that it does or it doesn't, and I don't know what the neighbors' plans are, if any, to sell or develop, but I'm just making the point. It has nothing to do with the approval of this development in my mind. But I just think that policy needs to be explored a little bit to what level do we really want to take this interconnection of streets?
Well, I'd say that north stub out that's on there does directly go into the road protection area, so I'm with you. I kind of scratch my head at the need to have either that western one or the one up north. I mean, obviously the
northern one, I think, is the one.
Near the northwest corner, I must say, Mr. Chairman, we agree, and I think Mr. Moody's hitting on
One
that.
that goes through the road.
Yeah, there's one up there,
There's
and
one
then
up
near
there.
That one.
that one, and the one to the west. Because
They need this one.
staff is responding directly to input from the board, and staff has told me that they feel like they're under a command from the board to do this. But I couldn't agree more. When we were told that we were going to connect to sites, the one to the north, I think, is unoccupied, it's a hayfield. But I believe the one to the west is somebody's house on it, and they're both in the northeast Pasco area, and all it does is cause a homeowner distress. And you're also hearing from the people in northeast Pasco, like they're thinking this is part of some master plan or that we're intending to go to Powerline Road. We've never intended that. And so following reflexively on this board policy, we're scaring people unnecessarily. And so
maybe a workshop, David, is in order with the board to discuss these particular issues and to what level and to what end they want to take this policy. I'm not saying that interconnection of streets is necessarily a bad policy. I'm just questioning at what level of street do we really want to do that.
Well, and I think it probably depends on the area. And one could argue that in the urban service area where you're planning for higher densities, there's a greater need for, it's harder to argue that in the urban service area that even vacant pieces of land are going to stay that way for the next 50 years, or they're going to stay rural because they're in the urban service area. If you get an apartment complex next to it, the chances that it's going to be a rural lot for the next 50 years is pretty slim. But does that same interconnect requirement make sense in the rural area or near the northeast rural? Maybe not. Unfortunately, our code doesn't get into that level of, the code requirement predated us creating the urban service area, the rural, northeast rural area, so I don't know that it's a blunt instrument. Now, I think staff tries, based on applicant request, to grant, I mean, you all frequently grant deviations from that land development code requirement. In fact, I'd say almost every MPD that comes through has one or two of those deviations in them.
And our code can always be amended too. You know, the code's not the Bible.
I get it. I'm just saying that probably what needs to happen is that it needs better stratification based on what the land use is.
Yeah. Again, unrelated to this project, the issue itself needs a lot of discussion. Maybe a workshop is in order to figure those things out. That's all.
Well, I mean, specifically in the context of this project, I mean, it interconnects the north, the west, except for the emergency access. I just don't see that. I can see the one on the southern property boundary, because it's likely that that property there will develop up residential between the housing, and so that makes sense to me, but I'd be much more inclined to approve this without those interconnects, either on the north side or on the west side.
Myself
Because
as
I mean,
well.
it butts right up against the rural protection
I
area.
assume this doesn't have enough units to require a second full functional access.
That's correct.
No, he said it would not.
Okay, so you need to have at least one emergency access, though.
So would that be
Which
that
is
one to
yes.
the north?
So this one here that says Catalina, that would be emergency access, but it would have a
Right.
barrier.
Yeah.
Because it's an emergency access.
Right, that's right.
So there wouldn't be just
There won't be
willy-nilly
traffic
traffic
going
through there.
But I believe staff has recommended approval of not interconnecting when it's connecting to the Northeast Rural Protection Area or to a rural area in the past. I've seen that justification in other MPDs. I don't know why that wasn't requested or approved in this one. You'll have to ask the applicant and staff that question, because I don't know the answer.
Well, I mean, again, the staff is responding directly to input that they're routinely getting from the board. And to Mr. Moody's point, we haven't fleshed it out like, hey, is one area of that county different? But I have a hard time believing that if we explain this to board members leading up to the hearing and at the final hearing on it, that they wouldn't support it. I just don't know that creating these two westernmost connections to Northeast Pasco are really what the board was trying to achieve with the interconnections. So we wouldn't oppose, that being included, obviously.
With the understanding that the one that connects to Catalina is an emergency.
Yes, sir. We
And it would
want to
be-
maintain that. We think
There'd be
that's
a
smart for
barrier
both
there.
projects. Right.
People wouldn't just drive through there.
Absolutely.
Well, in the future, a good compromise could be to, like you said, not have to do the stub out,
Right.
Maybe leave the lot open,
Right.
plat that section as an easement, but that can always be changed in the future, so.
Yep.
I did have one quick question,
Yes,
though,
sir.
regarding, since you're still up here. At least according to what I'm seeing on Google Street View, it looks like 14th Street at 301 is not signalized. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do we know if there's any, I guess that would be more of a question for staff, but we know if there's any plans for a signal out there at 301?
I mean, where it pops out to the right when you're northbound?
Yeah, where 14th Street connects to 301.
I can't imagine there's anywhere near enough traffic for that. There's probably less traffic in that area right now than when I was a kid, because there were so many more people cutting through to go to the plant. There was a lot of industrial traffic going through this area, and it's pretty quiet now.
Yeah. Going out to the lakes, I mean.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about where, because that's where, I'm assuming that's where most of the traffic's going to be going, is from this
Yeah, he's right.
development.
It's full. It's always been.
It's either down south to Long or north to,
Okay.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Did you- Mike, did you?
Do we have a motion?
Well, I just wanted to expand on that. In the event that a signal is not warranted there, and if there is increased traffic, that does create a safety issue. DOT, in looking at that, would likely close the median opening, make a modification, or something along those lines. But yeah, there's certainly, in my mind, not nearly enough traffic to warrant a traffic signal at that location.
okay. Yeah, that was just kind of, I know that would be a concern maybe of some citizens, that this project's going to add enough extra traffic to create a safety issue for people trying to get out on the 301. But so that's why I wanted to address that.
Okay, thank you.
And don't forget the no Yankees allowed sign.
Now, Mr. Gray, did you ever think somebody would accuse my family?
Or mine.
Half these people can't even understand me.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So in response to Larry's comments, and I appreciate them, Mr. Gray's been here, family's been here 5 or 6 generations. My family's been here 5 or 6 generations. That may not make you feel any better, but, I like to look at pasture land. I live in the Dade City area myself. Mr. Hobby's grown up here. I'm looking at land across the street that's currently pasture land that's going to be turned into houses pretty soon. Do I want to see that? No, I don't. But property owners have rights too. And that's within reason, and that's always the balance. And so when I look at projects like this, I look at the existing land use, as Mr. Hobby pointed out. They can go tomorrow and develop it with more units than what they're proposing. And so, do I want to see it that way? No. If I could go buy up a bunch more land and have more pasture land, I would. But you know, someday my kids will probably sell my land and they'll turn into houses. So, you know, that's always the balance that this commission has to deal with. So with that, I'd move approval.
Second.
Is that removing those
I'm
two
sorry,
access?
with the addition of taking out the western, those western.
The two western access.
Yeah, the northwest and the southwest.
And they still second that.
I'm sorry, what?
And they still second
Okay,
that.
good, thank you.
Okay, and I'll just second what you said about our longevity in the area, and for me, I'm a Vietnam veteran too, so I honor your service. And I have a lot of reasons to like a lot of the same things you like, so. But we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Just confirming, we're taking those accesses out on the west, and northwest, and south.
Yes. Mhm. The only one we're leaving is the emergency
Emergency
exit
out on the north.
that will be closed except for emergencies.
Well, I think there was one in the
There's one on the
southeast too.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about the extra ones. Yeah. I know you don't want to be
Well,
specific.
no, I didn't hear anybody saying they had an objection to the southeast one, that's why.
Correct, we don't.
Right. Okay. So all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
We have a second. Further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Waterways and wildlife depend on you to keep them healthy. Excess fertilizer, grass clippings, trash, oils, and pet waste wash into gutters and storm drains when it rains. Stormwater carries
You're listening to the Pasco Podcast with Mike Carballa. Welcome to Season 3 of Pasco Podcast, a series about leadership and public service. We'd like to thank our sponsors, the nearly 600,000 people of Pasco County, as represented by the Board of County Commissioners. It's through their trust and empowerment of our workforce and leadership team that we're able to bring you this podcast. This podcast is designed to help public servants build leadership skills and leverage them for success by sharing the experiences of our peers.
Hi, I'm Mike Carballa, and welcome to our 38th episode of Pasco Podcast. You might not know this, but Pasco has a department dedicated entirely to helping ensure that we as a county are able to get the goods and services that we need to do business, which ultimately serves you. And we not only rely on local businesses, we actually encourage them to work with us. And that's why the purchasing department is holding a